Welcome back, one and all, to Kevin Pollak's Chat Show. I am, as always, not buffering. Chat Show. That opening clip should remind us all of the ridiculous genius that is Peter Falk. Man had an extraordinary career, a couple of Oscar nominations. Off the beaten track, you want to look up Murder Incorporated, an unbelievably intense drama that he was nominated for. And The In-Laws, you just saw a clip of, or heard, those of you listening from around the world. My favorite comedy of all time, I've been saying it for maybe 20 years. Of course, I do the impersonations of Peter Falk and Alan Arkin, which is a great joy of mine, and has been. And I had the privilege of doing Peter Falk on The Tonight Show. The first time I did it with Johnny Carson from the couch to make the King laugh. And when I made the King laugh with the impression, he pushed himself away from the desk, holding his side, laughing, and I was invited back 3 times a year until he retired, and I'm convinced it was because I could do this. In fact, every time I did the Tonight Show after that, as I passed in front of Johnny's desk on my way to sit down, and arguably the most nervous situation of the year, as I passed in front of him with my back to the audience for a nanosecond before I sat down, he leaned forward, Carson did, the King, and said, "Excuse me, am I bothering you?" And we had an inside joke forever until he retired. But because I did the Peter Falk on The Tonight Show, I eventually ran into Peter Falk. And he said, and I've quoted in several stand-up specials, but it's certainly worth repeating now. He said to him the first time I met him, "Can I ask you, how do you do that with your eye? Me, I understand, but how do you do that?" And I explained it was a trick that I could teach him. He was very open about his glass eye. I remember reading TV Guide as a kid. I was obsessed with Columbo, and it was the first real impression I did. He said in TV Guide that he had a glass eye since the age of 3, and he told a couple of stories, my favorite of which was he was playing baseball in school, Little League, slid into second. Ump called him out. He took out his glass eye, handed it to the ump, and said, "You clearly need this more than I do." And the other one was the teacher had to leave the classroom and picked Peter to be in charge while she was gone. And he went to the front of the class, waited for her to leave, then took out his glass eye, set it on the desk, and said to his fellow students, "I have to go too, but while I'm gone, I'll have an eye on you." True hero, and unbelievably blessed in my case to have met him, and sorely missed. I, in a weird way, I guess, want to thank the 100 or so people who tweeted me directly as if I were a member of the family, feeling the sadness that had swept over my little camp there, and insisting that I carry the torch. So this is certainly my effort to do that. And I will continue to do so proudly. So anyways, in recent months, we decided to start showing a clip that pertained to our guest today. We had other business. Speaking now of other business, Sam Levine and I spent the weekend in Kansas City, Missouri. And I want to tell you,
boy, oh boy,
he will never be the same. Yeah. I am close to never being the same as well.
There's no recovery.
There's no recovery there. I don't know where to begin. Where would you like to begin, Sam, in recovering?
Let's begin with the baseball.
Shall we?
Because we both love baseball.
You much more than I. And clearly, as a fan, your whole life dedicated to your Cubs, as it were. We had a moment in the game when you put metal on the ball.
I did.
Or probably aluminum. The ball was rubber.
Yeah.
And then raced off to first base.
Oh, I was hustling down the line.
Man, were you hustling down the line.
I was.
And I believe thinking you were going to be tagged out and chose to slide into first.
I chose to make the dive.
Hands first.
Even in spite of everything I've learned to the contrary.
Yes.
Watching the plays, watching every manager go, every player thinks you can get into first faster, jumping for it. You can't get fast. And I did it anyway.
Keep running, they say.
Keep running, they say.
Actually faster.
But I thought, I'll dive for it. But the problem was, in the attempt of the dive, feet got crossed together.
A little bit.
And I was really booking it down that line.
Moving it.
So it turned into like something of a somersault, lasso over elbows, feet way up in the air. Just, apparently my teammates thought I was seriously injured.
We all thought you broke your back. I'm going to be honest with you.
And yet, Not a one of you got up to help me.
No, well.
Not a one of you.
That should speak volume.
Really?
Yeah. No one leapt to their feet thinking, broken back, what are we going to do?
What are we going to do?
There's no doctor among us.
No.
Someone's got to be calling 911 already.
There's a bunch of people here.
And then you rose.
And then I
to
popped
the
right up.
cheer of the crowd. You popped right up
Popped
as
right
if
back
made
up.
out of plastic yourself.
Yeah, you know.
Rubber and gum.
And apparently the throw had sailed wide.
It had sailed wide, and no one in your peripheral vision had bothered to tell
No
you.
one bothered to tell me. I was able to take second base.
And then you gathered yourself on to second
I
base.
gathered myself, stole third, and then came home on a single.
Right.
It was a great day for
You
everybody.
did score indeed.
It was a great day.
And then the next night at the auction, where the jumbo screen was letting everyone know what they were auctioning on, they eventually showed highlight reel.
Oh, they did.
Including
my
the
spectacular,
absurd, not choreographed slide into first.
Now, showing it at the auction on that big screen was one thing. You're forgetting they showed it on the jumbotron at the Cubs-Royals game to a stadium of some 40,000 people.
Yes. Well,
that was much sweeter.
There were more Cubs fans there also than Royals fans.
Well, what are you going to do?
Fortunately for you at home, we've got that clip now. Roll it.
No.
That clip.
Coming next week.
Coming next week.
I'm on it.
Yeah,
I'm on the case. There is video.
Sammy's trying to get this. Folks, you won't believe it. His back literally breaks, and then somehow it didn't. And it just was a cartoon character. There should have been stars and wheels of dust. It was just ridiculous.
I'm the most surprised of all of us that I was able to walk away.
And when we watch the clip, I do want people to listen closely, because I believe you will hear the sound as you get up.
I think you're correct.
And find yourself together in a second.
My favorite part of the game, very quickly, was the Cubs scored in the first inning, I think it was. And I'm applauding very loudly. Then right behind me, sit the fuck down! George Brett. George Brett. He didn't care for that.
No, he did not appreciate that.
Did not care for me cheering against
You
his
were in
Kansas
his
City
dugout seats.
Kansas City Royals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were with the royalty of George Brett.
He pitched in all the game.
He pitched...
and then he hit a home run with
somehow
two bats.
these two teams managed to get up to
11 runs
11
apiece.
runs each. It was 11 to 10, the bottom of the bottom.
Yep.
This was going to be the last half inning.
Yep.
And Dermot Mulrooney.
Hollywood heartthrob, Dermot Mulrooney.
Hollywood heartthrob,
The full-time.
Dermot Mulrooney, who, as he grays, as most men are fortunate if they have a head of hair, gets sexier. So he steps up, and they decide to pitch around him.
Not pitch around him. No. Intentionally walk.
Well,
there's a difference.
Yeah, okay. Intentionally walk.
Intentionally
showing the
walking.
difference of our fanship. I always thought pitch around meant the same thing. So way out pitching around. I mean 16 feet out of the batter's box. He takes 3 of those balls. And then later we found out a moment from a film he had done in his youth. Stepped 16 feet out of the batter's box to take a swing at the ball because he was so upset they were going to walk him intentionally, and hit a home run.
The game-tying
The game-tying home run. It was absurd.
It was so good, they decided to end the game at a tie.
Yeah, it really, truly. And I said to Paul Rudd afterwards, one of our hosts, that was got to be the greatest moment of the game, right? And Paul Rudd, with a very dead serious expression, said, "Kevin, that was one of the greatest moments in baseball." Not Wolf of Baseball.
No.
All of baseball.
All of baseball.
Yeah. And I was waiting for dun 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 from the
Don't sing anymore. We don't have the rights.
No.
It's okay. You're allowed to get like 3 seconds out. That's all.
So much thanks to our hosts, Paul Rudd, Rob Riggle, Jason Sudeikis, absent. He was stuck in New York doing the
Doing press
horrible,
for Horrible Bosses,
and we helped the Children's Mercy Hospital charity raise, I think, something close to 300,000.
I know it was definitely over 2.
Yeah, well, the last
for
second,
sure.
the Harris folks kicked another $100,000.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's brilliant.
So that was great. We got to do a good thing.
Yeah.
And also see John Hamm never sober. I think about 50 hours. And as our guest pointed out, the John Hamm you want to see, actually. He lived up to all expectations.
And we
then
found
as
his
Jamie
great
pointed
weakness.
Huh?
His great weakness.
Oh, we did. We did. At one point in the bar that Rudd's father built, which is a full-on Irish pub.
Oh, yeah.
With Guinness on. Ridiculous. And at one point, the wildly intoxicated John Hamm picked up a piccolo, I believe the instrument's called, and attempted to play And I announced to the room, finally, something John Hamm can't do. And the proof was in. And the Lord celebrated, because Hamm was clearly built by the devil. Jamie, in the last 2 days in our absence,
you're bragging about all these celebrities you get to hang out with. I got to go to Josh Negron's birthday party.
You got to go to Josh Negron's birthday party. Yeah. Well, that's why we go to you now. One of our producers, Josh Negron, turned 22?
6.
19.
He looks 17.
26 is the correct number.
Wow, the big 26.
Doesn't look a day over.
There was
4.
a list. You had to get past. I'm serious. There was a list of the velvet rope. I swear to Christ.
There really was?
Yes.
Oh,
there's a list of the velvet rope.
Oh, my God. I wonder how much extra that costs. And how was the production design beyond that? Because
it was a really nice venue, actually. I liked it.
Sweet. And the drink of the night?
Oh, my gosh. I discovered this new drink that they called it the South Side. And it's vodka and mint with a champagne float.
What the hell?
It was amazing. It tasted like, Elaine, I think, described it best as saying, this tastes like food, but in a good way. It's like you're drinking food. I don't know. It was delicious.
Delicious food in a glass that makes
It was so good. Because, you know, you get I love things with the champagne float because you get a little bit of carbonation, which is always good.
Liquid magic.
Delicious.
Well, thank you for that. Anything else?
I eat a hot dog on the street.
An illicit dog?
Yes.
There's nothing greater when you come out of a bar drunk.
Little street meat?
Yes. Well, easy, easy.
On Friday night, J-Mac and I got drunk and ordered too many things online.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. My accountant thanks you.
That's about it.
All right. And congratulations to the fine folks of New York for representing what the human race should catch up to. Now the gays, too, can be tortured by marriage. Congratulations to all of you who are now fortunate enough to go through the hells that is marriage.
To quote the late, great Richard Jeni, this is America. Gay people have the same right to lose half their shit to somebody else as the rest of us.
There you go.
No?
I know, as many homages as we can pay in one day to the dead, I think is important. And now let's make a list of who should be dead. So there we go. But now I guess it's time for audience participation, a little segment we like to call Ask Kevin, if only there were a graphic.
Ask Kevin.
Weird. Ask Kevin, this one from @R_Sergeant. This appears to be from the Twitterverse. What is your favorite movie soundtrack? Favorite movie soundtrack. Does he mean one that I've been in? Because I think it would be Casino. Even though
that's a great soundtrack.
Even though Randy Newman, I think, did Avalon, which was pretty fucking moving. I'm just going to go down all my films.
What?
I thought, no.
Wait, it has to be...
No, it should not be a movie I was in. I was being obnoxious. Your favorite, Sammy?
Oh, God.
That's not an answer
Boogie
because
Nights.
the George Burns movie did not have a great
Keeping in mind
soundtrack.
that the question was soundtrack, not score, right?
It is soundtrack.
Boogie Nights.
I got to go Casino.
All right.
Boogie Nights is amazing, though. In fact, there's songs in Boogie Nights that you cannot think of anything other than the movie Boogie Nights, even though the song was a needle drop and had nothing to do with the film when it was released.
Can I get the answer?
Yes, please.
I revisited the Swingers soundtrack a couple nights ago. That's a great one. But I think I'm going to have to go Big Chill.
Well.
I'm sorry, it's the best.
It is.
I also like, but I don't know if this counts, I love that Thing You Do, but that's all original music, so I don't think that counts.
Technically, it counts.
I love that. I love the soundtrack to That Thing You Do.
They put out an album, a soundtrack album from that. Yeah, it was more than a score. There were singable songs and what have yous. So there's your answer. This one is from Matthew Miller. Ask Kevin, have you ever had a conversation with Mr. Christopher Walken? Feel free to scroll up, Dr. Chen. Thanks, buddy. Now it's good.
Dr. Chen.
Here we go. There it is. An all-important rest of the sentence. Have you ever had a conversation with Mr. Christopher Walken as Christopher Walken? That was the part missing without the scrolling part. I have had the amazing opportunity. Jamie and I saw him in the Broadway play, The Behanding in Spokane, which we spoke about on this show. But the in-person was, well, if only there were a stand-up comedy special called The Littlest Suspect that you could be ordering from Amazon right now to see me do this live in front of an audience. But I'll share it with you now. And although Jamie named the special Littlest Suspect, it has nothing to do with my penis. I was asked to be one of the 2 speakers when Christopher Walken got his hands and feet in the cement in front of the Chinese theater there. And there was 100 press people there for the event. And before Christopher Walken got the actual person in cement, 2 speakers, Quentin Tarantino being the first one, and then me. I'd never met Walken. This makes no sense. I was honored, but had to ask how many people said no. How far down the list did you have to go? Quentin talked maybe an hour and a half until someone shot him in the head, and then it was my turn. And I did a bit. Christopher Walken, I answered the door on Halloween night as Christopher Walken every year now to scare the kids. Hi, trick or treat. It's a damn good question. Quite the conundrum, little dudes, you've put forth on this Hallows Eve. Having said that, here's good news. I have a question too. Which one of you pricks can guess what I've buried under my house? Hey kids, where you going? So I did that in front of him, and to see out of the corner of my eye, him lean from the waist forward laughing, it was one of those you can take me now, God moments. So yes, I've had that ridiculous pleasure as well. This last Ask Kevin is from Charles Shell. Hello, chat show. I'm a longtime fan of the show and eagerly awaiting your alleged move to Hulu.com. After taking advantage of Hulu's extensive Criterion Collection library, especially some of the old Ingmar Bergman films, I wanted to bring back an old challenge from some of your earlier episodes. Do you think you could make a 3 Degrees of Pollock connection to Gunnar Bjornstrand, because that's a name, of the Seventh Seal, and through a glass darkly fame? Sam?
Keep scrolling.
What have you got? He asks. P.S. Looking forward to Don Cheadle in July. It only took 2 years and 118 episodes before you got your second African-American guest. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Well, we do not like black people here. And we've only had Don Cheadle on in July because of a court-ordered...
Eric Balfour wasn't black?
I think you're confusing black with obnoxious.
What? No. No, he's black. You guys are wrong.
Don Cheadle will be here, I think, July 10th, unless someone plays this for him. Then, this gentleman writes, I use the word gentleman loosely, 15 minutes later he writes us again. I just looked it up. It was in show... Poor Kenny.
Uh-oh.
Scrolling's not for everyone.
We've had an incident. Aren't we supposed to be the dark ones? What's going on here?
Sam and I are on fumes. 16 minutes of sleep between us. And Dr. Chen apparently kicks our ass when it comes to who did some partying this weekend. Anyways, he wrote back to us and had figured it out. He got there in less than 2 moves, and Max von Sydow was the connection.
All right.
Unfortunately, I've never worked with Max von Sydow, so I'm still not sure what the connection was, but he did in fact work. So
von Sydow worked with Tom Cruise in Minority Reports. I'm sure that's it.
There you go. And good night.
I'll be here all week.
That is 2 degrees from Gunner.
There you go.
Suck it. I don't know why Kevin Bacon needs 6 degrees that pussy. And now it's time for your Larry King game. This week's winner, Jeff Crone. Jeff, write us again at contact@kevinpollak'schatshow.com and tell us your address and your shirt size so we can send you a Kevin Pollak's Chat Show t-shirt of your very own, where hopefully you'll walk around and let all your friends know about the show. If you, too, would like to offer up an Ask Kevin and have a shit all over you, or your own Larry King game, write to us at contact@kevinpollak'schatshow.com. Again, for our guest, the rules are, I want a bad Larry King impression. A good one will not be allowed. I want a bad Larry King impression. And it's Larry, too much information moment, a TMI. And then he goes to the phones. So it's all like a little bumper before he goes to the phones. And this one offered up by Jeff Crone. Once, in order to curry favor with then Pope John Paul II, I graciously shared with him a jar of pickled pig knuckles during Yom Kippur. Fearing removal from Judaism, I excused myself and made my way to the papal latrine. I must say, the room was quite the spectacle, until I forced a finger down my throat and offered up my version of a Jackson Pollock. I'm not sure what the Vatican interior decorators make per hour, but I'm sure it wasn't enough that day. Bangs, Texas. How can I help you? Larry King game. Quite thorough. And
our guests are getting a little long in these Larry King games.
It's getting a little long.
I gotta be honest.
Yeah, a little wordy.
It's a little wordy.
Well, I think they're trying to outdo the last one. And that's where we're ad nauseum.
Economy of words, people. Economy of words.
The password is edit.
Yeah.
But another cold reading this week.
Really?
That was another cold reading. Yes.
That's impressive. Is that how you explain?
That's why. Yep,
Shit,
the
what's that
laughing.
Jennifer Lopez movie?
Oh, you didn't have that? The wedding planner? You didn't have the wedding planner at the ready?
I didn't have it at the ready.
Wow.
Did not have it at the ready. Still haven't seen that one.
Who went to the fucking Juana Man on me last night on the bus?
Nick Kroll.
No Kroll, that son
Nick
of a
Kroll
bitch.
took a Juana Man shot
Nick
at you.
Kroll, who's in like 30 seconds of a movie.
And good night. Okay. I think we've made our guests wait long enough. It's only been 74 minutes. As a member of the... Thank God I didn't put this in the teleprompter this week, is all I want to say. Thank God I'm actually speaking from my heart for a change. As a member of the Writers Guild since the late 80s, I've been tortured by the blank page many a time. And these days, of course, that would be a computer screen. And have tried to figure out how to share my particular voice, my bent, my point of view to a large, if not small audience, whatever I could get. The opportunity to change the way people think about a genre is one that a writer, well, never gets a chance to do. So when it happens, it becomes a ridiculous moment in time for other writers to, A, contemplate suicide at very least, but be inspired is the D that we all hope to get to. Get out of your own way is the mantra you have to say at that point when you see this kind of work. So, like many of you, I became more aware of this particular writer, today's guest, when this television show Lost came about. And in a time when event programming was starting to disappear and is now all but gone, I remember attending viewing parties at the home of some celebrity. There's no reason to mention names. Matthew Perry. And I remember sitting there during one week's show, episode of Lost, thinking, when have I ever gathered at anyone's house other than my parents when I was 12 to watch a show, when my mother and I would watch Columbo? It was astonishing to me then that this had happened. And now it's all about setting the DVR. You better damn know when to record. But watching it live with other people was something that took place with this particular show. And then the debates that took place afterwards were equally as enjoyable. It's been a dream and a hope and a wish, and then I went after Sam. What do I do? How do I do? You know our guest today, please. And then it was only until I was able to corner him in person that the wheels sped up a bit. And then, as I announced to all of you for the last several weeks that he was coming, I believe it took me 7 attempts to say Lindelof, which I only now think still
Almost.
close.
You're close.
Got to get the D in there. Got to get a little bit of a D in there.
You have to kind of swallow the
Lindelof.
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 Yeah, there's a little bit of the D, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of the D. Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. Nothing. A little bit. I heard things. Damon, thank you very much for being here today. Honest to God. It means a tremendous amount, especially, well, everything aside, but especially if we factor in your ridiculous schedule at present. Oh, my.
It is an honor, and I find it oddly amusing that I have some reputation for being a difficult guest to...
A difficult get?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If I had known you had Balfour on.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. That's the...
And we apparently made the mistake and booked white Balfour.
Still not convinced.
And, so I like to, we have a little dossier that we put together, but I like to jump all over the place. And instead of starting, as much would think, with the born possibly raised in the Teaneck.
Yes.
Was that the first thing that you and Sammy shared, was the New Jersey youth?
Such a leading question.
Well,
it is the first thing that we shared that I'm aware of.
That you're willing to admit.
Yes, exactly. Although we didn't know each other in New Jersey.
Right, of course.
We feel like we knew the other one was there.
Right.
In some sort of Luke and Leia way.
Oh, wow. There's a writer's pull if I've ever heard one.
There you go. But not in a directed way where if we were to meet, we could kiss.
Sure.
And it wouldn't be inappropriate until subsequent films in the trilogy.
Yes, when you found out it was wholly inappropriate.
Correct.
But instead, I'm going to jump around and go right to a potentially current, it can't be a feud because it's kind of silly.
All feuds are, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Even the Hatfields and the McCoys.
Right. Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
So, in doing all the lovely research, have you watched the show?
I have, yeah.
And I know at the time of your last quote on the subject of the alleged feud,
yes,
which is all, again, silly.
Sure.
At that point, you were interviewed, I believe, said you were on page 300 of reading into the books. Let's just say you've improved beyond that. But
oh, certainly.
Watching the shows, the episodes, how did your fanship grow? This is, I'm guessing, before you picked up the book?
I was probably about a third of the way through the first book, and there are 4 books. A 5th book is about to come out.
Right.
When I first read Mr. Martin's comments, and then I finished the book. And once I finished the book, which I think is somewhere in the realm of 1,100, 1,200 pages, I was reading it on an iPad, so you can never. Right. It's like you're on page 1,700 of 2,300. Mm-hmm. So, right. But I was subsequently told that the book is not 2,300 pages long. I finished it, and then once I was finished with the book Game of Thrones, I then started watching the series. So I had about maybe 5 of them stacked up on my DVR, mm-hmm. and then I caught up, and then I watched them on Sunday nights. That was my Sunday night double dose was The Killing and
mine too, yeah,
and Game of Thrones. Depending on what kind of a mood I was in, I would alternate.
Which one you'd watch?
Which one would be first?
Yeah, same here.
And so yeah, I'm now almost done with the second book, Clash of Kings, mm-hmm. and have completed viewing the first season of HBO's Game of Thrones.
So one would venture a guess that you're enjoying these works.
Very much.
Yeah. So when you find out that George Martin, not that George Martin.
George R.R. Martin.
I know. Please, with the R.R. Railroads. Speaking of the railroads.
It's kind of cool to have 2 middle initials.
Yeah. J.R.R. Tolkien. Your first response was laughter or?
My first response was anger.
Good.
When I first heard of it, because his language was so strong and so definitive. I think the first thing that I read was, he was being asked, and he was doing press, obviously, for the TV series,
right.
and was talking about writing the 5th and then 6th books, sort of how he felt about the pressure of ending it, and he said, well, as long as I don't pull a Lost, I'll be fine, and I was just... And he sort of presented it as it was an empirical thing, that sort of pulling a Lost was a way to completely and totally, fuck over and disappoint your audience versus...
In terms of a last episode.
Yeah, exactly. Just in terms of ending it that way.
Right.
And then, so I was like, wow, this is very upsetting. And then right on the heels of that, he did an interview I found out about sort of the next morning in Time magazine, because I followed this writer, James Poniwozik, whose name I'm probably completely and totally mispronouncing, but whose writing I love. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, since George R.R. Martin has opened up the can of whoop-ass on Lost, I should give you guys a sneak peek at what he said to me in the upcoming issue of Time magazine. And in that one, George R.R. Martin said, watching the finale of Lost is like having a turd left on his doorstep.
Jesus.
And he just absolutely hated it and thought it was a betrayal and all these things. So at that point, I was like, well, I'm gonna tweet him. And so anger is the first thing that I was feeling. Mm-hmm. But then, as my therapist is fond of saying, anger is just is fear or sadness in disguise. So right underneath the anger was intensive sadness because George R.R. Martin is not a random writer to me. He's a guy whose writing I really read a lot of when I was a kid, especially as sort of an adolescent. My dad was really into fantasy stuff, and he wrote this series of books called Wild Cards that my dad and I would read. My dad and I would often read books together at the same time. We kind of race each other to see.
Then fair to
who
say
would finish
childhood
first.
hero.
Yeah. So I'm basically like, George R.R. Martin is the fucking shit. And the only reason that I hadn't been reading the Game of Thrones books is because Lost happened, and
You're not reading anything.
And yeah, I stopped reading books.
Yeah.
And that's no excuse, but
no, it's real though.
And then so as soon as Lost ended, I took upon sort of this big list of things that I needed to do, like watch the entire series of Battlestar Galactica, watch the entire series of The Wire, get up to speed on Breaking Bad, read George R.R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire. So I'm 300 pages into his book. This is the first real book I'm reading in all this time when I read these comments.
When you find out you left a turd on his doorstep.
Yeah, I did.
Now,
and that was not my turd. It was not my turd that I left on his doorstep. It was a friend's.
Let's be clear.
A friend's turd.
Let's be clear.
Because look,
it's
if you're
funny.
If you're gonna do that, they can with the DNA testing.
Absolutely.
They can.
You're not stupid.
Right?
You're not stupid.
They know. You can know it's you.
Yeah.
They're gonna know.
Yeah. If you're gonna leave it, if you're gonna do the old turd step, as we call it in the trade.
Yeah, they can tell by the way you pitch.
You know better these days.
Sure.
Years ago, you might have found Columbo
Right.
at your door.
Yeah.
Sir, I believe we found a turd. We're not sure who it belongs to.
Yeah. There's one more thing.
Yeah, just one more thing. Is in fact, you're missing a Jew element in your DNA. Because the Jewish ego,
I'm a Jew.
I can assure you, there's some missing.
Okay.
A slightly more, well, there's, you know what?
I should be writing this down.
It might be the old gang version of the East Coast Jew and the West Coast Jew.
Okay.
Because anxiety and insecurity, I think, is spoon-fed by the Jewish mothers and grandmothers on the East Coast. Whereas on the West Coast, it's you're perfect, you can do no wrong. Mm-hmm. The healthier Jew ego,
Or Jigo.
Or Jigo.
Or Jugo.
Jugo. I like Jugo.
Yeah.
Because it might be a car.
Sure. Yeah. It's definitely not a martial art.
In fact, it's definitely not a martial art.
Jugo versus Judo. Judo probably better.
Judo every time.
Use their momentum.
Yeah.
Sort of the same.
Jugo is a Spanish pronunciation of a car. Thank you. So what's missing there of the performer's ego, maybe it's the difference between a writer's ego and a performer's ego, is the only way to feel betrayed and ripped off and as if a turd had been delivered, as if you were madly in love with what I'd created and what I'd delivered, until then. And it doesn't seem like there was a moment of, holy shit, he fucking loved my show.
Not at that time.
Right.
Subsequently, he later amended his comments when asked about our feud, which, by the way, our feud was the equivalent of me standing outside his house with a bullhorn, except he was not inside the house.
As in on Twitter.
Right, sure. And yes, exactly. George's, sort of not, if you check out his website, is not exactly, this is sort of in the GeoCities sort of era. So he was only aware of our feud because reporters started saying, what do you think about this feud you're having with Damon Lindelof? And he said, who now? He then amended his comment to basically say that he was a huge fan of the show.
If I may.
But was very disappointed by the ending. But then, sort of interlocked in that comment, he said that I was just so pissed off that they were dead the whole time. And they were dead the whole time to me. Spoiler alert. I don't even know what camera I'm looking at.
Oh, there's that one.
Spoiler alert. To me, that's always the telltale sign for people who did not watch the entire series.
No kidding.
They were dead the whole time is usually someone who watched like the first 2 or 3 years, got really angry, stopped watching, and then came back either in the last season or for just the final episode,
right,
and basically deducted they were dead the whole time.
I fucking knew it.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
So I started to wonder, was that the case? And then Carlton, George R.R. Martin was in the Time 100 this year. And we were in the Time 100 last year. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Standards very high. Time 100. Absolutely. Just, Hillary Clinton? Nope.
Sorry.
George R.R.
You'll
Martin?
get him next year, honey.
In.
Yeah.
So Carlton was there in New York City, and he approached Mr. Martin. This is what I love about Carlton, and said, "Hey, I hear you. You think we left a turd on your doorstep?
What the fuck?"
And George was this is what I admire about him.
Right.
He did not say I was misquoted. They misinterpreted me. He said, "Hey, man, you know, I loved your show. And I hated the finale, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it."
Right.
And the reality is George's opinion is not a unique opinion. It is, I wouldn't say a widely held opinion, but an opinion that has been shared with me quite a great deal over the course of the last year.
You'll never get tired of.
Very familiar with. It's just when it's voiced, I could always go to the place of, well, the person who has that opinion doesn't understand what it's like to be a writer. The person who has that opinion is, some frustrated guy living in his basement. Whatever my stereotype of the sort of internet troll is.
Right.
But this was George Martin, so I could not go to the place of, well, screw him. He's an untalented, frustrated fucker.
This hack doesn't know what he's talking about.
He's a super talented writer whose work I continue to enjoy.
Childhood hero.
Yeah. So when you hear that, you are indubitably left with going, wow. Did we fuck up the ending? Did we make a misstep?
But the answer is no, and I love in doing the research for this. Thank you again, Jason McIntyre. I every time you guys were asked about leading up to the final season, not about the aftermath, leading up to the final season, the so-called responsibility and so on, as you guys explained it. It was great because there was an utter lack of being defensive. There was, we'll be held accountable to ourselves. We could not be more pleased that we spoke to a large group at some point, and at various points larger. To become cult heroes, incredible. To become this thing, great. But we are accountable to ourselves when trying to figure out how to wrap this thing up. And by the way, every time we try to download information, as I love you guys called it, into an episode, we got a bunch of shit about not carrying the torch that we were interested in carrying in the first place. So, and I also, Doug, your take on the Sopranos finale and the sort of reaction you both had afterwards.
Which we loved. We thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and you were in the process of devising your final season or thereabouts, because I remember you in the interview you said you turned to each other or called each other and said, "We're screwed."
Yeah, we're fucked. Is exactly what we said, which is the Sopranos finale. I believe was sometime right around the end of our third season, or coincided right around the time that we finally got the network to agree to end the show.
Right.
And so we were really very excited about all these ideas and plans that we had, we could finally start executing because we were hamstrung by not knowing how much of the race was left to be run. And so this idea of like, yay, we are now finally going to end the show. This is going to be great. Was within weeks of the Sopranos finale airing, and after the Sopranos finale aired, Carlton and I think we were in New York City. We were about to be interviewed by this guy, Matt Roush, who is a critic for TV Guide.
Yeah.
Is a fan of Lost, a great guy, very smart. He was going to moderate this thing for us, and we were having coffee like in the green room, talking about the Sopranos finale and how we just thought it was a complete and utter work of genius. And Matt Roush said to us, it's been very polarizing. It's very divisive. This was the day after, or maybe 2 days after.
I can remember having screaming matches with people.
Just, and he's like, a lot of people think it was a cop-out, that it was terrible, that, it was, uninspired and a betrayal and all this stuff. And that's, as he was talking, Carlton and I looked at each other and we were like, oh my God, just by the virtue of saying we're going to end it, now we don't get to say we were canceled. Oh, we had such a great plan for you guys. If you'd ever learned what the smoke monster actually was, now we've got to fucking do that shit.
Or that his name was Larry.
Yeah. Well, you're not far off. You're not far off.
Well, the thing, first of all, so many places to go. But first of all, there's a thing among comedians, honor among thieves. But you'll see another comic on stage, and he'll not only come across a thought that's original, but his execution is original. And as a comedian, your only thought is, fuck, That's how you do that. And so I first want to ask, when the screen goes black and the entire world thinks their cable bill wasn't paid, that extended black screen before credits running, that moment in time where everyone is duped momentarily.
Yes.
When we're all having that moment, does someone of your ilk have that comedian's reaction of, oh, what a great thing to, forget all the content discussion, but just that little gimmick, that little trick at the end of keeping the screen dark for too long to have that. Now, he had his own design for it, but the reaction.
Yeah, I remember very specifically what happened, which is I was sitting on my couch, and then they, it also happens in the middle of the lyric of the Journey song. So it's not, it was incredibly abrupt. And the screen just went black, and I sat there for a second, and then I looked for my remote control.
Yep.
And in the moment that I was looking for my remote control, it dawned on me that this was completely and totally intentional. And then I did sort of the slow motion, like look back up to the screen like this. And my wife was in the kitchen behind me, because our kitchen is sort of like open to the living room area, and she goes, "What happened?" And I went, "Shh."
As you stared at a black screen.
And then the credits started. And I don't think I had an oh shit, I've just, my feelings about The Sopranos, I mean, that
not of being duped, but of, as a writer and creator.
My feeling was the slow clap, that's all I felt like in that moment. There was no level whatsoever of, in that moment, I was just a fan of that show. Sure. Later on, as I was turning it over in my head, it did start to create that sort of sense of, wow, no one is ever going to be able to do anything like that again. And he completely and totally changed the conversation. And it started actually upsetting me once I heard the polarizing thing, but then afterwards, there was this sort of, people actually started doing to The Sopranos what had been happening to Lost, which is they started applying this weird game of sort of theorizing to it, where it's like, hey, let's watch the scene again, and you see this guy at the bar who's looking at Tony, well, he's actually from and I was like, that's not the story that Chase was telling.
Right.
You can apply, we trained you to watch Lost that way, you're supposed to look for the Easter eggs, but he would never be so cheap as to have to make you watch that scene 9 times in order to understand what his intention was. He presented you with his intention immediately, and that's it. That's all there is to it. Don't try to overcomplicate it.
Right.
But
the fact that became a debate and a backlash was a cause for concern.
Sure, and what's amazing is, in the light of the Killing finale, which is now the thing that everybody's talking about from last week, The Sopranos is the thing that's coming up again. Mm-hmm. I was and by the way, one is a series finale, and the other is a season finale. So they're completely and totally, you can't really compare the two. That being said, people are still bringing up The Sopranos as a what not to do example, and I want to find them and I want to shake them.
Exactly.
And slap them.
Yeah. I want to hold them while you're doing the slapping.
Oh.
If I may.
Because you didn't like The Sopranos finale.
Oh, I did.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I want to join you in an effort.
You want to wrap your...
I will be restraining them.
You want to restrain them.
While
I thought you wanted to comfort them.
No. I will attach electrodes to their nipples.
Oh. Here's an important question. Which great shows, are collectively viewed as having ended really well on an amazing high note?
MASH.
MASH.
Find me the person who says that the final episode of MASH.
Well, it's the helicopter.
It was a big. Also, it wasn't a chicken. It was a baby. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm talking about MASH right now.
Yes.
For those of you who haven't seen it.
Speaking of spoiler alerts.
Perfect ending, and I have yet to run across anybody.
Yeah. Anybody who's ever said a bad thing about that.
There's one. Newhart, and that's the other one.
Newhart wakes up.
That's comedy, though. This is different.
Well, just as difficult to land.
Yeah.
Those that go for it. I mean, I can't really even. All due respect to Friends, it was a game changer, incredible. I don't really think that they did anything in their final episode of Friends that I can say, oh my God, they did this.
Right.
I can't.
Cheers had the empty bar and somebody came in.
Yeah, we're sorry we're closed.
Yeah, right.
But I mean,
so that was pretty good.
So you can count on one hand. Is what I'm saying is you can count on one hand the number of shows over the years that have ended.
And
where
the Seinfeld fuck up is remembered more than any.
Let me toss one other though. I think the 6 Feet Under ending in the drama realm. I have not come across anybody who derides that ending. There are people out there who will say the old age makeup was not as good as it could have been, but as a premise and the execution, incredible.
Right.
So That's another one that I feel empirically stuck the landing.
A couple of points here, though. At the end of the day, you can only be, as I said, held accountable to yourselves, which Chase was, held accountable to himself. He didn't create that to fuck with people. He created it because it made him unbelievably satisfied as a creator and writer of the show.
Sure.
And ultimately, that's all you can do. But and also, getting back to Martin, what I was leading to, without him defending his words, which made it clear to you that he was a fan of the show, anyone who says they felt ripped off by the ending, anyone, was an unbelievable fan of the show. There's only one way to be disappointed.
Sure. That
you are passionately in love with the show. So that was the thing about his original comment, that I read it as, what an unbelievable thing to know, and then find out he's a childhood hero.
Yes.
And also, I foolishly assumed, as if one could ever get used to that sort of disappointment, that he didn't understand as a writer that you were being accountable to yourselves, and actually took this rather pedestrian path of, how dare you be accountable to yourselves, which is all anyone is really saying of intellect when they say, you chose the wrong ending for me.
Right.
They're saying, how dare you be accountable to yourselves. So, yeah, it was that, holy shit, when I read it, it was like, that's unbelievably cool that he was such a huge fan of the show. So, straying away from that.
Let me just say one more thing about it, though, which is the place that I live in now.
Yes.
Is, to me, if George R.R. Martin has basically decided that the Lost finale is what not to do, the fact that Lost may have an overwhelmingly positive influence on the way that Game of Thrones ends, the fact of the matter is like, if he's writing away from that, that's cool to me.
Fuck yes.
Because basically, you know, George R.R. Martin, you changed your ending. My ending was so fucking bad. You changed your ending. That's rad. Yeah. That's the place I live.
You can't get me out of your head, can you, Martin?
Absolutely. Totally.
Chaos theory. Thanks. Very impressive.
Yeah.
And if it's not good, George, I've got a turd with your name all over it. I do. I know where your doorstep is.
And to be clear, not his turd.
Right.
Just a turd.
Have you ever seen that game show, Not My Turd?
No, but I have not.
Be surprised how many people eat corn. Go on.
Good God.
Thank you.
Oh my.
I thought we were going to end with that. I'm glad that you led with it. Now we can just talk about stuff nobody cares about.
No. That's the difference between this show and others.
Good.
The people who tune in actually are interested in your journey, which is why I very much wanted you here. Because I'm not a fan of the debate beyond it being a healthy exercise of passionate people. You know, the right and wrong aspect of it is complete and utter horseshit to me, and that's the writer in me. The fan in me. Do you remember Letterman hosting the Oscars?
Oh, sure. Uma Oprah.
I loved it.
Me too.
And when the reviews came out the next day saying he was Hitler, I was more than dumbfounded. And then he went on to make an even bigger deal about how awful he was at it, simply responding to the negative response.
Sure.
And it started becoming clear that these things are not decided by the creative people. These things, these reviews, these critiques, these opinions. And I've always had a problem with inexperienced critics. That is to say, the thing that bothered you about Martin was, here was a guy I couldn't be dismissive of.
Sure.
If you haven't made a film, if you haven't actually gone through the process that it takes to even get a script greenlit, let alone cast and produced and edited and released and marketed correctly, if you haven't gone through all of those things and somehow had a thing, I don't really want to hear too much about what you thought of my film. But I'm very curious as to not only who inspired you. I mean, I hear your father and you would read Martin's books, but who inspired? Because I've talked to a lot of that "hey, look at me" disease that performers suffer from. But for writers, it almost seems like a "hey, don't look at me" disease. I don't need to be in any sort of spotlight whatsoever. I would rather create from thin air a world of my choosing. Which, again, not to get back to Lost, was pretty fucking amazing. So, but to have those designs in going through the research, that it started pretty young in terms of wanting to write multi-character, multi-dimensional stories.
Yeah. At the risk of being completely and totally obvious and cliche, I think the first memory that I really have as a human being is going to see Star Wars in 1977. And I only remember certain parts of the movie, and certainly on any sort of level of narrative track, other than the fact that it completely I became completely and totally obsessed. And my father, he had a movie projector, a 16mm movie projector, and he was somehow able to procure like little scenes from Star Wars, like the scene where Luke and Han are in the Millennium Falcon shooting down TIE fighters, and also the trash compactor scene that he would play until they broke, and then we'd splice them together again, and I would just and then Empire Strikes Back, etc. So the first creative impact on me was definitely Star Wars, and that the idea of world creation. I just remember being completely and totally fascinated by this idea of a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Wait a minute, this happened before now? So the idea that there were sort of futuristic motifs, but it was also almost biblical in its presentation.
Right.
And then that whole idea of the Force on sort of a spiritual level being something that was much more appealing to me than this God that everybody was talking about.
You're the first fan, by the way, of the trilogy and beyond that I've heard mentioned long, long ago.
Oh, yeah, well.
I mean, honestly.
But isn't that...
Everyone talks about the galaxy far, far away, and everyone thinks about it as so futuristic in its design compared to the life we're currently living.
Right.
And I haven't heard many people speak to being grabbed by that. Everyone's aware of it, but being grabbed by it is what you're saying that I find.
Yeah, definitely, because, you know, this idea of its history.
Right.
You know, and to me, someone who's still believing in Santa Claus and all these other things, this is real history. I mean, Luke and Han are actually realer to me than Moses or Adam and Eve or any of these other things that supposedly preceded me. It almost gave it a veracity because it was a long, long time ago. You know, and so that's number one, Star Wars, and then. Second influence happens when I'm maybe 10 or 11, and it's the Stephen King influence.
Started reading
Stephen King, and the first Stephen King book that I read, I think, was Salem's Lot. He had published he had more books out than just Salem's Lot. That was his second book, and after Salem's Lot, I read, I think, Pet Sematary, which scared the living shit out of me. Then I read Carrie, and then I read The Shining.
Now your dad, who somehow again
is not in prison for child abuse for giving me these books.
Well, or procuring these footage of Star Wars that were not available to the public.
No, it was available to the public. They were in actual these little 16mm boxes with.
You could get a couple of scenes.
Yeah, it was before VHS or beta. Like, yeah, you could just. It was available like that, and like Heckle and Jekyll cartoons, and it was legit.
Oh, I see. Right. But I didn't realize that Star Wars was selling 16mm clips.
They were just for like your home enjoyment,
Holy
like
crap.
Just little excerpts. I think, or my entire idea of my father is about to be changed.
Well, if the CIA
off the back of a truck, shut your mouth.
If he went to the trouble to sort of mock up the packaging just to con me, that's a.
What year did VHS start? Anybody? Somebody? You two always know shit like this.
79, 78, 79, somewhere in there.
So, and is your dad bringing home these books and saying you might like this also? Is that how you're getting turned on initially?
No. Salem's Lot, I just grabbed.
Heard about.
I just grabbed off his, because I knew I was interested in vampires.
It was in the house.
It was there, yeah. My dad was a huge Stephen King aficionado, and I thought he had a really cool name.
Other kids are searching for and finding their father's Playboy. You, on the other hand,
well, also that.
Found Salem's Lot.
Yes, found Salem's Lot. And then the big game changer, I think I was maybe 13, was The Stand.
Right.
And that Carlton and I have talked about in our sort of parallel journeys, and I think JJ as well. There was an intersection at The Stand as sort of a groundbreaking piece of fiction that blended all the things that sort of genre that was sort of dancing around the idea, some supernatural themes without being overtly supernatural at first. You cannot identify a clear-cut protagonist. There's a certain hero character, but it was much more of an ensembleized version. But more importantly, this idea of getting to sort of tell, you know, fables and parables and spiritual stories, morals, and all these sort of grand themes. The Stand was an evolution beyond just it's a vampire story, it's a burying dead people in a pet cemetery story, it's a haunted hotel story. It was this sort of very transcendent thing. And as soon as I finished it, I started it again. So it was the first book that I read twice in my life.
And is it some point during the second reading that some of the things you just mentioned are becoming clearer, or does those observations not actually come until adulthood?
I'm not sure if they came consciously.
You're not a writer yet. You're just mesmerized by these pages.
Yeah, just the idea, and George R.R. Martin does this too in the books for Game of Thrones. It's just each chapter is just told through the point of view of one character, and when you do that, even the bad guys become completely and totally fascinating and identifiable and emotionally connective just because you are in their body. So even if they're doing despicable things, you know, because you're in there, you're seeing the world through their eyes, you can somehow kind of understand it. And, you know, I really totally jive with that kind of storytelling.
Right. Other than the brief stint as an on-stage performer with, of course, Petting Zoo.
My research team must be hunted down and killed.
Why do you scoff?
I'm just sorry to hear that you've
we have your first music video. Let's roll that.
Let's.
Nope.
No.
Was there?
Was there a music video? Oh, God, no. No. Just the fact that we named our band the Petting Zoo, I think, is crime enough.
Well, it sounded wanton.
Yes.
To me.
We were a barefoot acoustic jam.
Of course you were.
Two gentlemen. Mm-hmm. Two acoustic guitars.
Right.
Took our shoes off and played lousy songs. Some of them even comprised of 4 to 5 chords as opposed to the traditional 3.
Holy crap.
All in an effort
to get laid.
Oh, no. Just to make great music.
Sorry.
What kind of pervert are you?
My mistake.
Right. Yes.
Petting Zoo is the only reason I thought.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So.
And you, Sam.
What? Sam doesn't do research. No, we did not get that one from Sam. That was a J-Mac original. Considering the old joke, did you hear the one about the dumb blonde who came to Hollywood and tried to get ahead by sleeping with a writer? What
Funny.
The hell was
That's
it?
the whole movie Bowfinger. You like the movie Bowfinger?
Yes.
I love the movie Bowfinger.
Recurring joke.
Heather Graham.
Yes.
I think might be the one in question.
That was biographical.
Yes.
About Heather Graham.
It was. Hey, what?
That was funny.
Well, that's why we laughed.
Jesus.
Yes.
Sam gets all the jokes.
Yeah, God forbid the head writer gets
I
to slip
thought it
one
was
in.
funny.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bingo. He's got awards. I've got glasses.
Drama awards. I really don't understand comedy entirely.
Some of us got the joke.
Okay.
Of the polar bear. What the hell was it actually that inspired you at that some point that from reading, from gathering, and then before off to NYU?
In high school, definitely, and before that, I was always interested in creative writing, making up stories, telling stories, trying to talk people into illustrating my stories. That was definitely sort of my game. And through high school, I gravitated towards the theater arts because that was the
the storytelling.
Yeah, and the musicals and the plays and all that stuff. Never really wanted to be an actor per se, but that's where the people who were interested in the same things that I was interested in were hanging out. The sort of we were not the most popular kids in high school, but we also were not shunned or picked on particularly. But a very sort of creative energy flowing around that.
Weren't called drama freaks just yet?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Drama freaks. But there was a lot of writing going on there too. At this point, I was in high school in the late '80s, and we had video cameras. provided to us, and television production classes. So friends of mine and we always, when a teacher would give us a project idea, like for whether it was for history or for English, we would say, can we do a video version of this instead of having to write it out? And they were always very sort of game for this stuff.
Can we make a short film is what you were asking.
Yeah, so we did we did a short film of the Odyssey, and then, you know, the Civil War and all these things that, you know, we started writing and producing, you know, episodes, for lack of a better word, and they were well received.
Very well received.
And fun to make, and much easier than
writing
term papers.
Paper.
So that was sort of the beginning of it for me. And then I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, which was right across the George Washington Bridge from New York City. Both my folks worked in New York City. My dad was an executive at Citibank, and my mom was a teacher in Spanish Harlem. And every time that I ever set foot in New York City, I was like, this is the greatest place in the world, and I want to live here. And when the first time I set foot on the NYU campus, which is essentially Greenwich Village, I said, this is the college that I'm going to. And when I was a freshman in high school, I found out that NYU had a very good film school. So I just said, this is what I'm going to do. That's the only school that I'm going to apply to, and that's what that was my goal. So
Hell-bent.
Hell-bent. And so that was the only school I applied to, and I was fortunate enough to get in. So I started NYU in the fall of '91. And
then you found that there was actually writing programs.
Sure.
And is that what? So, in other words, what I'm wondering is, just in terms of just writing,
yes,
or in terms of just writing, is that where the focus begins, or are you still?
I think at that time I was still entertaining the idea that I might also direct, you know, because I don't think I had a real sense of the fact that you could just be a writer. At the same time, or maybe a couple years earlier, certainly more than a couple years earlier, I was a huge television fan, and Hill Street Blues was a television show that suddenly keyed into all those things that I was just talking about with you earlier in terms of multi-character, kind of serialized world creation. Hill Street Blues, what city is Hill Street Blues take place in?
Exactly.
No city.
Yeah.
Like, they made it. So
any city.
So any city. So the idea of that show started making me go like, somebody is making this up. Somebody is writing this. Like, who are these guys, Bochco and Milch? And so the idea of maybe TV is in my future as something that I would like to do started kind of occurring to me. But at the time that I went to NYU Film School, and NYU really is all about this, it's an auteur factory. They're not really interested in television, and they're certainly not interested in writers.
Right.
It might have changed now, but in the early 90s, it was like, who's going to be the next Oliver Stone? Who's going to be the next Scorsese? Who's going to be the next Spike Lee? They want
filmmakers.
They were all NYU alums, and it was sort of like, we were all there to be those guys. And somewhere along the way, I just started being the guy who wrote everybody else's thing, and was not really comfortable directing, was not really good at the skill set directors require, you know, instant decisiveness,
egomaniacal,
working with actors,
egomaniacal,
riding crop, you know, all the accoutrements.
Control freak?
Yeah, sure. Well, I am a control freak. I just, you know, I like to be much quieter about it,
right,
I guess. So that wasn't really working out for me, and I did direct a thesis film, but by the end of directing it, I was like, I'm not interested in ever directing again.
Really?
So by the time I graduated NYU, I was like, you know, the goal is writing.
Well, one of the reasons I asked about the sort of jumping off point was because you were fortunate enough in your youth to have, it sounds like, encouragement, if not support, from your family to read. And not a lot of us do.
Sure.
You hear a lot about the importance of inspiring that in children, and it certainly was lacking in my home. There was never even a suggestion to read anything.
Can you read?
This.
Okay.
See how big that print is? You at home can read that. You on a plane can read that while looking out the window. So what my point was that you were well aware of there are people who sit alone and write these incredible stories. and they are names that I now recognize and collect like baseball cards. And here's some favorite of my writer, my authors that I would like to be. And then Hill Street Blues sort of catches your attention, and the notion is, in what medium will I write? This looks like a great one.
Right.
This television thing. Oh, I'm not getting support from school from this. So I was curious if there was a moment in time where you were so inspired by Stephen King, or dare we say Martin's name yet again, that the idea of being an author of literature was something that...
That idea definitely occurred to me, you know, am I a novelist? And I definitely took stabs in my adolescence at writing a novel, and found myself so completely and totally writer's block isn't quite the right sensation, just sort of jammed. The idea of actually the discipline required to sit behind my computer and just write for an hour. And it wasn't even a computer at the time.
No.
You know, I guess that was a Brother word processor is what I had at that point. And I wrote several chapters of my great novel, which was about a kid who gets thrown into a mental institution because he's seeing and hearing all sorts of very strange and disturbing things, which may or may not be true. And after 2 chapters of it, I said, this is not for me. I'm not. And also, it's just terrible. I mean, really bad.
Well,
bad prose.
Yeah, being a novelist, many things in life are tossed away saying, well, it's a young man's game. And certainly being a novelist, I wouldn't think is a teenager's game. No. Let's point to the number of novelist prodigies over the years. Let's see, there was... Nope. All right, so you graduate, you've had your little taste of directing, and the notion is go west, young man? Yeah, my roommate at NYU, this guy Eric, he and I were sitting doing bong hits in our musical instrument.
Sure. Yes, exactly. The bong. It's like the piccolo, except you put marijuana in it and you light the marijuana and suck on it.
I see.
But otherwise, very much like the piccolo. And we were just sitting around and we were like, we're graduating from NYU in 3 months. What are we going to do?
Literally.
Yeah, and we just sat there for like a minute, and I think Eric said, should we go to California?
Wow.
And I said, yes, we should. And the next morning, it was sort of like we both wanted to pretend a little bit that the conversation never happened. And no reference was made to the conversation having happened until 2 weeks before we graduated, at which point we sort of awkwardly said, hey, are we going to California for real?
Remember the California conversation?
Yeah. Yeah, right. You were serious. Yes, I was also serious.
Yeah, no means?
No, nothing.
Either of you family out west?
None.
Okay, friends?
We had a friend.
A friend.
Who had broken up with a girl. And the girl who had been broken up with lived in Los Angeles.
Hello, Larry.
And she was willing to let us sleep on her floor for like 3 nights.
This is getting great.
Yeah, which is classy.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I cashed in my bar mitzvah bonds.
Nice.
That's what they were there for. They hadn't fully matured.
I'll say.
They're 10-year bonds. They were about 8 years mature, cashed them in, and that enabled me to make a down payment, my first and last month's rent with a security deposit for a lovely place on Franklin Avenue, just in the western region, which is, from what I understand now, sort of Silver Lake adjacent, but at the time, crack house adjacent.
Run down adjacent, I was going to say, yeah.
And I had a 1979 Chevrolet Impala, which I put my futon in, at least the mattress. I couldn't fit the frame.
Still, the fact that you could fit the mattress in, it's pretty impressive.
And a duffel bag full of poorly folded clothes, rolled.
How many Star Wars figurines?
All my Star Wars figures did make the trip.
All of them?
All.
You would be bowled over.
Well, the fact that it's even a thing.
But they're out of the boxes, because I played with them.
Hello?
Yeah. Well, there are people who are like...
You weren't running a museum.
Right. Sure. I like to play with my figures. So, and I met up with him in Chicago, and then we drove to LA in 4 days, and we got here, and we were like, okay, now what do we do? We did not have.
You waited till you got here till you start asking the hard questions?
Sure. That's the only way to do it. Put your back against the wall.
How much in the pocket?
Because otherwise, you never go.
Right.
Because no one's going to hire you if you don't live there yet. At least this was our thinking.
Yeah. Was there any?
We probably should have put a little more thought into it.
Was there any input at all from friends or family or anyone, mentors perhaps, professors, letting you know what might be waiting for you out there on the other side of the moon?
There was a definite anti-industry bias present at NYU in general. Absolutely. For all the reasons that I said earlier, because it was an auteur factory. So the idea that there was an industry out there, and it's like the whole job, the whole idea is to make money.
You're going to sell out.
Yeah. So.
Oh, right away.
And very few, surprisingly, at the time, very few of our professors had the experience of working in Los Angeles. A lot of them were, you know, filmmakers, but more along the lines of artists versus sellouts. So it was something that we were a little bit ashamed of in sharing with our peers. We also didn't want to share it with our peers because I think we were like, we're in competition with these people. The job market is about to be flooded with a bunch of recent graduates, and if we're the only couple who are from NYU competing with a bunch from USC and UCLA, at least we have uniqueness going for us.
You did have that wherewithal.
Yeah. Well, I mean.
Also, is there a chance
to be cutthroat? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Is there a chance that you're also have the same realization that, well, we don't want to do what these idiots want to do, who are taking themselves uber serious as filmmakers and being auteurs?
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say that, as to call them idiots. I think it was more along the lines of.
You'd be wrong.
Yeah. Well, but the idea of. A lot of our classmates were in much better financial straits than we were, and they had the option of farting around for a couple of years,
right,
or a couple of years, or 5 or 10 years, and being supported by their folks or their trust funds or whatever it was. And because that option was not available to us, the idea that we immediately had to enter the job market, we were both had student loans to pay off that immediately sort of kicked in. The sort of pragmatic reality of we must now go get jobs was definitely driving the proverbial
and
train.
By the way, I'm of course kidding when I insist they're idiots. What I'm
morons, I think I'm more comfortable with.
Thank you. What I really
NYU 94.
What I'm really thinking though is that this whole idea of being the auteur, the very group that was saying you don't want to go out there, is a group that you actually weren't relating to. The idea of being this auteur, that was the focus of NYU at the time.
It felt like it was. Whether it was or whether it wasn't, it definitely felt that way. And there was a part of that I really embraced. I mean, you know, the idea of the cinema studies classes, just basically watching like all those French New Wave movies are
exciting as
you know, yeah, exactly.
Sexy, crazy, sexy.
Yeah, you're just like, okay, yeah, I want to talk for 3 hours about Godard, you know, like I'm down with that, but I'm no fucking Godard. Like you sit and you watch these films actually had the opposite effect on me because I took a class that was just the films of Martin Scorsese, and even just after Mean Streets, I was like, this is not inspiring to me. This is terrifying because I will never ever direct a movie that good. How old was Martin Scorsese when he directed Mean Streets?
4.
He was like 6.5.
It was ridiculous.
No, I mean, so every movie that I saw that was supposedly turning me into an auteur had the opposite effect, which was, that is not me. I'm never going to do something like this. And then while I was in film school, I saw Reservoir Dogs, which is my personal answer for best soundtrack ever, because you hadn't heard those songs before, period. You know, and anytime and those songs all existed. So even Boogie Nights, which is phenomenal, and the wonders of that thing you do that is completely fictional but evokes a feeling of that era. For me, Reservoir Dogs is amazing because I was convinced that all those songs that I was hearing had actually just been made retro, like Little Green Bag or whatever. But no, they existed.
Stuck in the middle with you.
I'd never heard that before. Obviously because
you were too young.
I was too young, but also because those were not top, you know, #1 hits.
Popular of my youth.
Yeah, so
they were.
To me, Reservoir Dogs, nonlinear storytelling, Tarantino, who the hell is this guy? Total auteur. That was like sealed the deal. No way, never ever going to be able to do that.
Pull that off. We always ask that our live viewers offer up some insightful questions.
Great.
I did realize that we had discluded them long enough. Fan and friend of the show, professionally and personally, at Travis Rink. As a Stephen King fan, he asks, what's your favorite Stephen King novels? What's your favorite films or TV miniseries adaptations of King's work? So we've discussed The Strand, changing something inside of you. So let's talk about the adaptations.
Yeah, so I think The Stand is definitely hands down my favorite book. And the King adaptations are very, very tricky animals because I almost feel like he writes in such a way that it almost defies adaptation. But that being said, there have been several great ones. The most obvious, of course, happens to be my favorite, which is Kubrick's of The Shining, which is the scariest movie I've ever seen in my life, and completely. It's such a strange movie in terms of the guy that who you are rooting for, who you are starting out with. Like every movie or every book basically declares you are this guy, you are Jack Torrance. This is the fact that guy becomes so terrifying by the end of it that you're now the hero. The hero job transfers to his wife and his son. Was just so extraordinary to me, and that movie just. I can literally name like sort of 12 moments in that movie that just have stayed with me to this day. And I will not watch The Shining on a television if I am alone in my house. Well, I won't do it.
So when you need a little pick-me-up, you watch the Steven Weber version.
Sure, yeah, exactly. Which actually, I like the Steven Weber version.
You should.
That is actually a really good adaptation of The Shining, I think. And there were a lot of changes that Kubrick made.
Sure, this is Kubrick.
And the Weber version was much truer to the novel, but more importantly, Weber so likable.
Yeah.
And Jack Nicholson, you're just waiting for him to go ape shit, batshit,
Yeah.
batshit,
Batshit.
ape shit is
batshit.
yeah, batshit.
Yeah.
But Weber, it's a little more disturbing when it happens because it's the guy from Wings.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Aside from Weber having sat here and defended his right to that role, we had a filmmaker who did two Stephen King adaptations, which were two of Stephen's favorites, being Stand By Me and Misery.
Yes, Mr. Reiner.
Yeah,
course,
but
yes.
I mean of a different sort of less haunting, or rather, a different kind of haunting.
Yes.
Certainly, both wildly disturbing.
Yes.
Your take on those two? In terms of adaptation.
I love Stand By Me, which is obviously based on The Body, which is a
short story.
a novella from
right.
different seasons,
Right.
and one of King's stories that is not supernatural in any way, shape, or form. And there's not even hints of the supernatural in it. Misery also doesn't have overt elements of the supernatural, although there are sort of indications or prophecy dreams or sort of hints of a telepathic understanding or whatever. But sort of both of those things set in the real world. And another one of Stephen King's books that I love, this one, Gerald's Game, which is completely and totally can't be adapted in any way, shape, or form. That's why it's so amazing. I really respond to when he writes those kinds of stories because they're so character-centric, and I think that there's something so amazing about Stand By Me because there's an inherent sadness to the entire design of it, just in the framing device of Dreyfus, and which was. Also the novel is told in the first person, so the only way to sort of capture that is to sort of start the movie with, now I'm an old man and I've got kids of my own and I'm now going to tell you the story about what happened. Another great soundtrack, by the way, Stand By Me. But I'll just always remember, I had read The Body before I saw the book, and thinking that that Rob Reiner was going to change the ending so that it was much more upbeat, because the last 3 pages of the body are essentially like, here's how every single kid fell upon either death or misfortune or got killed in the war or whatever. And the fact that Reiner did exactly the same thing, it was like, you know, okay, so this was sort of this great experience that we had, and the big victory in the movie is that Gordy pulls a gun on Kiefer Sutherland and claims the body for himself, and then afterwards it's just like, this is the last time we really all saw each other. My parents continue to treat me like shit because of my dead brother, and I never lived up to that. And River Phoenix, the most, you know, sort of accessible character in the movie, you know, later in life tried to, you know, break up a holdup in a store or something and was killed, you know, completely arbitrarily. So you sort of walk away from it with a sense of complete and utter emptiness and sadness, which was the complete point of it, and I think, you know, Reiner captured beautifully. And then Misery, an amazing book, and an even better movie, I think. And I remember when I read the book for Misery and I heard that there was going to be a movie. In the book, Annie cuts off Paul Sheldon's foot. In the movie translation, that's Kathy Bates and James Caan. And I was like, they're never, ever going to do that. And they didn't. What they did was 10 times more terrifying, which is she comes and she gets the two blocks and the sledgehammer.
Cobbling.
Yeah, oh my God.
Yeah.
Was it hobbling or cobbling? Did she make him shoes?
You know what? It is.
That was an alley-oop.
It actually is cobbling.
It is.
I know. Okay. As funny as your correction is.
Yes.
And very funny.
Yes.
And seeming to have a point.
Yes.
It actually is cobbling.
Right, it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Broke his foot. She's like, now I'm going to make you some shoes. It's even more terrifying.
She turned his feet.
Why would you make me shoes after you? Look how swollen it is.
Tell me that isn't more terrifying.
It is. I think you've just improved it.
I have.
You have.
There needs to be a new director's cut.
It's good.
Where she forces shoes onto his feet after their giant purple lumps. Yeah. So yeah, how unnerving when she puts those. Oh my.
Terrible. So
yeah.
And then, you know, the Misery just employs a trick that I might be misremembering this, but my memory of the novelization of The Shining is that the Scatman Crothers character does not get killed. He actually kind of comes and saves the day as a Deus Ex Machina for Danny Torrance and his mom. But in the movie, Kubrick was like, wouldn't it be awesome if this guy is like, he's riding in to save them and just gets fucking axed in the chest.
Right when you've assumed he's going to.
And then Stephen King used that trick from Kubrick's adaptation of his own novel in Misery, so that every other chapter in Misery is this lovable sheriff and his wife who exchange this kind of great banter, are like getting closer and closer to the realization that Annie Wilkes has Paul Sheldon in her house. And he basically shows up at the house. He's asking her some questions. He hears a noise in the basement. He opens it up, and then she fucking blows him away. And it's just the greatest thing ever, because you're not allowed to do that in storytelling. And again, Rob Reiner was like, I'm doing this in the movie. Like, I'm going to introduce you to this couple. You're going to fall in love with this guy, and then, you know, just when you think that he's going to rescue the main character, he's going to get killed, and now the main character has to get out of it on their own, which is sort of awesome.
Yeah, utterly. So thank you, TR. Another thing we do here...
Wow, that was way too much information for that question.
Listen, writer's perspective, writer's point of view, these are all things that I'm personally fascinated with.
Cool.
We opened with another writer's perspective and take on your work. Why shouldn't we hear yours on others?
Oh, but I'm going to say nice things.
Well,
joking.
You're more talented.
No, I say mean things too sometimes.
Yeah. Well, please. This is the place.
No.
Let's go.
God, no.
You know, also the snarky thing has been taken up by amateurs online from their mother's basements to incredible success. That why even jump in? It seems so pedestrian at this point.
It does.
Another thing we like to do on the show is to have the viewers, the fans, offer up a list of 5 questions in a this or that form. Coke or Pepsi, no correct answer.
Yeah.
And this is under the guise of the title, Tweet 5.
T5, T5, teapot forever now.
The lovely Dave Koechner helping us
Love
through that
him.
moment. Yeah.
He's fantastic.
Also-
Love him in Anchorman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was barking on stage in Kansas City at people at the auction trying to get them to spend money, and he also lost his voice in the efforts of raising those $300,000.
I don't know how either you or I have any sort of speaking voice today.
Well, mine's an octave lower. So they put together a tweet file for you, this particular person, Twicknet Mom, at Twicknick Mom, because that's a Twitter handle, Twicknick Mom. At least I pronounced it close enough.
Twix?
No, there's no X. So it's a this or that, Coke or Pepsi,
Tweet.
no correct answer.
Okay.
All right?
Twint.
Designed for you. Ready?
Yes.
Man in Black, Darth Vader.
Darth Vader.
Jack or Locke.
Locke.
Star Wars, Star Trek.
Star Wars.
Comic book, movies.
That's comic book slash
or,
movies?
Or movies.
Oh, movies.
And Hawaii or Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
Clearly.
Yeah. Why is a strange place? Awesome, but strange.
Had a very dear, hilarious friend once refer to it as Alcatraz in Technicolor.
No.
I
A
know.
very wise, clever friend. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Hawaii, but it is... There's something that happens when you get off the plane there, man.
Mm-hmm. And something that happens when you get back home.
Yes, indeed.
A sense of relief, oddly.
Yeah, well...
You're missing the relaxation that might have taken place.
I had a Hawaii experience prior to Lost, and then once Lost was created, an entirely different Hawaii experience.
I would think. You went from tourist
to working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well then let's start in the jumping around process to how in the hell you and JJ Abrams met and became collaborators. What the hell? I've never heard this.
You've never heard it?
And I've kind of been an alleged fan of both of yours, and I never heard the connection. In fact, I'd heard both sides of who created what, who started, where it really started, in terms of Lost. Mm-hmm. And then some of the research says, no, you and he and this and that, so I'd rather hear it from you.
This is my version of the events, but in no means the definitive version, but the way that I remember it, and I'm
Have him on the
sticking to
phone
it.
in case you get it wrong.
Excellent. I was a huge fan of JJ Abrams.
Alias and...
starting with Felicity, pretty much, and then Alias, and just thinking this is the, at that time, and I was already out in Los Angeles at that time. Definitely much more interested in television than I was in movies, in terms of I was just watching a lot of it, the sort of episodic, serialized stuff, much more, up my alley, and Felicity was already kind of doing that, also sort of breaking some rules. I was not a huge watcher of that kind of a show, but for some reason I completely dialed into it. And then Alias was a huge game changer. At that time, I was already an established television writer. My first gig was on the show called Nash Bridges, which was a cop show with Don Johnson. I worked for Carlton on that show. It got canceled, and I went to go work on this show called Crossing Jordan, which was, thank you, Sam.
No problem, buddy.
Which was a medical examiner, sort of procedural on NBC. And that show, Crossing Jordan, started the same year as Alias did. And on the cover of TV Guide that year, it was Jill Hennessy, who was the star of Crossing Jordan, Kim Delaney, who was on this new show called Philly, and Jennifer Garner. And the big joke in the Crossing Jordan writers' room was that we were all watching Alias and loving Alias. And although Crossing Jordan had significantly higher ratings than Alias, Alias was on the cover of Entertainment Weekly and Rolling Stone, and it had made this huge sort of cultural impact. And everybody knew that JJ was behind it. So this idea of, we had this idea of what the showrunner was, and that idea was Bochco or Milch or David Kelly. But here now is one of us. Here's a guy with glasses.
Similar in age.
He's kind of young. He's kind of nerdy. He embraces that. He's very facile. He's very cool.
As nerdy was becoming cool.
Yes, geek chic, exactly.
Yeah, he was on the cutting edge of that.
Yeah, he and Joss Whedon, who was also a huge inspiration for me. So, big JJ fan. And essentially, I had a friend who was an executive at ABC named Heather, it was Heather Layton at the time, now Heather Caden, who also introduced me to my wife. So Heather Caden, very, very important figure in my autobiography. I had been saying to her, God, can you just is there any way I can get a job on Alias? I would love to work on Alias. I still have another year on my deal here at Crossing Jordan, but once it's done, I'd love to work on Alias. The timing never worked out. Whenever Alias had a job opening, I had always committed to another year on Crossing Jordan, and so on and so forth. So finally, we were in the middle of the 3rd season of Crossing Jordan, and Heather calls me up on a Friday evening, and she says, and it's the last week of January, and she says, so I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I finally figured out a way to get you in a room with JJ. And I'm like, I don't even care what the bad news is. That's awesome. She says, the bad news is it has nothing to do with Alias. Lloyd Braun, who is the president of ABC, has this stupid idea. She didn't say stupid, but it was sort of like this crazy idea about doing...
But slightly dismissive?
She was like... she couldn't be dismissive of him because it was her boss at the time, but they had, at the time that she made this call to me, the network had jumped through such hoops to bring this idea into fruition, and it kept not working. And this idea about a plane crash on an island, and we want to do Survivor, the drama series, and it's just not working. So Lloyd has talked to JJ into taking a look at the script that we have. At the time, it was called this thing called Nowhere, written by a gentleman named Jeffrey Lieber, and JJ says he is way too busy to do this. He is currently showrunning Alias, and he's doing another pilot for us, this thing called The Catch. So he refused to even look at it unless we could bring a writer to him that he could potentially supervise were he to gel to the idea and perhaps executive produce. So can you meet with JJ on Monday afternoon?
I'm sorry, that's all good news.
Yeah.
There's no bad in there.
No.
That's extraordinary.
The only bad news is
you have to do all the work.
It's probably a project that isn't going to go anywhere, but the whole idea was if you can impress JJ enough,
it'll be great for the next one.
Maybe he'll give you a job on Alias.
Right.
But Lloyd is very, very high on this idea. And I said, tell me more about this idea. And she said, that's it, pretty much. Plane crashes on island, that's the series. And so over the weekend, I started thinking, okay, there's no series there. Definitely no series. But maybe there's 6 episodes. Or maybe, if you stretch it enough, there's 13 episodes. And the key is, if every character on that plane has got a secret. And the show would basically be about the thing you cannot get away from on the Desert Island show, and Gilligan's Island experienced this, certainly is, how do you make the show not about getting off the island? Because if they get off the island, the show's over. So
also, the audience is pretty quick to jump ahead that they're never going to get off.
Right. So the answer to me felt like you had to stock it with people where this crash was the best thing that ever happened to them because their lives were such shit before the crash that they're sort of in no rush to get off the island.
It's a bit of an epiphany, by the way, because the moment I remember just when the marketing started way after the fact that we're discussing now, when people started to talk about this new show called Lost, and the description wasn't too far off. A plane crashes on an island and they can't get off, and it's a dramatic version of Gilligan's Island, which is what was going around, not the Survivor.
Right.
I didn't hear anyone say anything interesting in terms of how they would do it, how they would try to figure out that puzzle of how you make it so ridiculously interesting for them to stay on the island. Wanted to dash in a little perspective there of the of the civilian take on this idea.
Yeah.
So you on your own thought they all have a secret.
So that's thing one, is they all have a secret, and thing two is every episode would have to focus on a different character, and that would allow you to retard the storytelling so that the script that Jeffrey Lieber had written took place over the course of like the first 6 months on the island, which is a natural instinct because it's why there's that time cut in Castaway between Tom Hanks starting fire and then it's like 4 years later, now he's getting the fuck off the island because there's just who wants to watch the one where he gets a coconut, like not interesting. Or is it?
Or is it?
Or is it?
In the wrong hands.
So the idea of saying like every episode is just basically going to be a day in their lives, and you have to find people who have secrets are also going to be in conflict with each other. I don't think you can do the society building show, the Lord of the Flies show, because you don't want to see them like having elections and like who's in charge? Who cares who's in charge? Like, what's the threat? Like, what are we going to do? So, and then the other thing that occurred to me over the course of that weekend was that the show had to be told non-linearly. The idea that the audience might not gripe about them not getting off the island if they got off the island every week, and the way that we could dramatize these aforementioned secrets was in flashback form. So these are the two big ideas that I brought to JJ. That every week would be a different character's life, and we would flash back to their life before the island.
And off the island.
Yeah, and off the island. And we could jump all around the world. Different characters could be from different places. And then I pitched him the opening of the show, which was sort of my other conceit was, if you made it very mysterious, just the presentation of the show, if the characters are going to be secretive, maybe instead of starting with the plane crash, which is the obvious way to go, you start up with the guy waking up in the middle of the jungle wearing a suit. He's dazed. He reaches into his pocket. He pulls out a small bottle of alcohol. Our brain immediately goes airplane or hotel room. Mm-hmm. A dog comes running up to him, looks at him, takes off. He hears a noise, follows the dog, and comes across the aftermath of the plane crash. And then later we can go to, and then any scene that happens on the plane will have this tension because you know it's going to crash. So those are my 3 contributions to that meeting. And JJ's contributions to that meeting, first a little bit about that meeting. I was terrified because I was a huge fanboy, and so this idea of suddenly like...
You got one shot, kid. Get in there.
I don't even know how I'm going to present these ideas, and I don't even know if JJ is passionate about this idea. Is this an Alias interview, or are we really talking about this thing? And, you know, and I went in, and JJ was immediately... It was JJ... A couple of the Alias writer-producers, Jesse Alexander, Jeff Pinkner, and then Brian Burke, who's JJ's sort of, you know, Brian Grazer, for lack of a better word. And I was outnumbered, too. Like, here are these guys who've been working on the best show on television, in my opinion, for the last 3 years.
When you walk into that room, because I know what it's like for an actor.
Yes.
But as a writer, when you walk in that room with your 3 big, later to be proven to be revelations, you have 3 big ideas about what to do with this show, and you're wondering, is this really a meeting about Alias or not?
Yes.
Do they undermine whatever confidence you were able to muster stepping into the room when you actually sit in front of them? Is it that kind of nervousness? Or is it a little bit of a lightning of the fire under your ass saying, you really do have one shot at this, and be brilliant now?
The first thing that happened in that meeting was I made the best fashion decision of my life.
Really?
And there are so many, Kevin. Brilliant.
I've got 4 pages. I've got 4 pages.
My dad and I were members of this Star Wars fan club called Bantha Tracks, which in the pre-internet ages you had to mail away for, and they sent you catalogs. And so I had, from when I was a little kid, I had a Bantha Tracks, like a baseball tee. So, you know, kind of the sleeves like went down to here or whatever, and it was a nightshirt for me. When I was a kid, I slept in it, and it would hang down below my knees. Now, as a 30-year-old, which is how old I was on this day.
Fitted tee.
It was, you know, it was a fitted tee. So I was just, this is my lucky T-shirt. I wear it, you know, very, very rarely and sporadically, but it is I'm Linus, and that is my blanket.
Right.
And so I wore it, and then the first thing that happened in that meeting as I was waiting out on a couch, literally like pretending to read a Variety, but not reading it at all.
Horribly.
And JJ comes out and he goes, Bantha Tracks! And he's...
Wow.
And we started talking about the Star Wars fan club, and instantly he just started treating me like I was a peer as opposed to a subordinate.
Yeah.
And that was the tone that was struck from there on out. So he started talking first, and in his presentation, as he was talking, everything coming out of his mouth was just as exciting to me as some of the ideas that I'd had, if not more so. JJ was talking about the island, and the first thing that he talked about was this island that they crash on has got to be really amazing and mysterious, and it'll be a discovery show. The things that they find on this island are going to be really sort of what drives the intrigue about it. I think that they should find this hatch. This is 5 minutes into the meeting.
Wow.
Like, that is really difficult to get open. I think that there should be a flora and fauna on the island that has no business being on an island in the South Pacific. I think that there should be other people on the island, and who they are, and how long they've been there, and what their motives are, whether they're the remnant, whether they're the people who built the hatch, or they precede the people who built the hatch, is for us to figure out, but I don't know. And so he sort of went on and on about this stuff. And then that became the chocolate, and then I said, well, here's my peanut butter, these things that I just said to you. And I pitched him the opening of the show, and he basically said, hey, like, can you come back tomorrow? This was on Monday. We talked for maybe 90 minutes or 2 hours. And I said, I have a full-time job, but maybe I can come by afterwards at like 6. And he's like, I don't even get here until 6. So,
damn it.
Yeah, I said, perfect. So I told my boss, of course, Tim, who later went on to create Heroes, hey, this meeting that wasn't supposed to go anywhere with JJ Abrams is actually sort of generated sort of an interesting conversation. And the thing that bears mentioning at this point is it's the last week of January, and we're talking about a pilot. All the other pilots have been ordered at Christmas time a month ago. So they're all casting, and they have these scripts, you know, things that are important to have.
Unbelievably.
When you're going to shoot a pilot.
The ship has sailed in January.
So it just felt like there's no way that this is actually going to happen on any reasonable timetable, but can I go back tomorrow? And so I went back on Tuesday night, and I worked with Jeff and Jesse, with JJ floating in and out, and then again on Wednesday night. On Thursday night, I presented JJ with a 20-some-odd page outline of here's what the pilot will look like. And Friday we got together, kicked some ideas back and forth, and then sent it off to ABC on Friday night. Now, during this time, I was completely now in the circle of buds, and JJ would leave funny messages on my voicemail and send me emails. Emails were going back and forth. He kept pranking, like he does lots of voices. JJ is actually a very talented impressionist and comedian.
Is that right?
And performer. He's in 6 Degrees of Separation. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Rent 6 Degrees of, JJ has it's not a cameo, a real role in the film 6 Degrees of Separation.
Buddies?
Yes. One of the sons of Donald Sutherland's friends.
Friends, right.
Anyway,
he's the Jew.
He's the Jew.
Gotcha.
He's the Jew, not a Jew in real life.
No.
But playing a Jew.
Right.
In any case, so on
Saturday,
Saturday,
he would leave these pranks for you, and a connection was more than forming.
Yes.
In about a week's time.
Correct. We are friends. Like, I cannot believe that this is actually happening to me, and I keep just waiting for the bottom to fall out. On Saturday morning...
And Tim's cool with this.
What's that?
Your boss at the time.
Tim is totally cool.
You've been working for him on the show for how long?
3 years.
3 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's unbelievably thrilled for you.
Yes.
It sounds like you're getting that kind of support.
He's super classy.
Which needs to be pointed out is a bit rare.
Even more classy about it was Alias was literally our Mozart, and we were Salieri.
Right.
So this idea of like, you know, fucking Alias. Yeah. Like, we love it so much, but we will never be... Our television show is we can't do the stuff that Alias is doing. We're a procedural. Like, we're doing the best we can, but...
We're on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Yeah, we're not on the cover of Rolling Stone. They're on the cover of Rolling Stone. So there was a bit of a rivalry, so that made him all the more classier for this happening.
Right.
On Saturday morning, at 8:30 a.m., my wife is in Kansas City. Full circle.
Hello.
Strange.
What in the world?
Visiting her mom. Not my wife yet, not even my fiance yet. And I get a call at home, and I answer the phone, and I hear, hello, Damon? Lloyd Braun. And I go, JJ's been pranking me all week. Lloyd Braun is the head of ABC. I worked on Crossing Jordan for 3 years. Yeah. I didn't even meet the VP on the project, let alone the president of NBC. So I go, hello, Lloyd. And there's like a 5-second long pause. And he goes, listen, I read your outline. I loved it. We're fucking making this thing. And I'm like, is this really Lloyd Braun?
Did you
No, I didn't say it. Right. I just go, thanks? And he goes, obviously there's lots of conversations to be had, but you need to be in production in 3 weeks. You know, can you write it? Can you write a script out of this? And I'm, shh. And then my call waiting starts ringing, and I look, it's JJ calling me on my other line. So I now know.
Can't be JJ.
Yeah. Thank you, Lloyd. Oh my God, so excited. Blah, blah, blah. Hang up.
Lloyd becomes sir.
I click over, and JJ's like, Lloyd Braun's about to call you. Don't do anything stupid. So he
like thinking it's me.
Yeah, he picked up
Sergeant Peterson, Chicago PD.
Yeah, there you go.
It's that moment.
He picked up the show based on this 25-page outline 5 days after I met JJ, and very long story short, which we can drop into and talk about with any greater degree of specificity, 11 weeks after that point, we delivered them the 2-hour, finished, completed, shot, edited, scored pilot of Lost. So.
No, you didn't?
Yep.
What the fuck?
True fact.
So he said, I want you in production 3 weeks. That wasn't pre-production.
Production.
He wants you shooting in 3 weeks.
I think within a week, we had basically dispatched a crew of 30 people to the Mojave Desert where the airplane graveyard is.
Yes.
You know, where all, with blowtorches and chainsaws. They wrecked an L-1011. They had semis pull up, put all the parts on the semis. The semis rolled to Oakland, and then they barged the pieces to Oahu. And we were already shooting by the time they got there. We did the plane crash stuff like the second and third week of our shoot. So that's how it had to happen literally within 2 days. There was no script.
No.
And which ended up being actually quite a blessing, I think, in terms of the way that the pilot turned out, because we had to write the script simultaneous to casting, and that allowed us to make suits to order versus off the rack.
Yeah, what the hell? How are you able to cast figures that are so important to an overall story? For example, one of the fans and friends of the show, who may in fact be in the chat room at this point, our social media expert, Elaine Ewing, later became part of a viewing group of The Lost. And, you know, I asked her, here's an opportunity if you had anything on your mind. And she was asking about the character of Jack, who, an early version, hearsay, fact, Michael Keaton.
Yes.
And also supposed to die.
Correct.
In the pilot.
Michael Keaton's not supposed to die.
No.
The character of Jack.
The character of Jack.
Yes. True.
How fast track is all that information, or is it just Michael Keaton's interested, now he's not, go elsewhere?
No, in that outline.
Because that, again, this is happening in 3 weeks.
Yeah, in that outline, Jack dies in the middle of the show. In the body of the monster basically attacks. They go out to the cockpit. They get the transceiver from the pilot. The monster attacks. In the show, as everyone knows it, the pilot dies. Greg Grunberg dies. In the outline, Jack dies. And so Kate basically returns back to the camp, and she becomes the new, Kate and Charlie do, the new de facto sort of leader of the group. And JJ's idea was, let's get someone like Michael Keaton.
Stunt casting.
And we will put Michael Keaton like in all the ads for the show. Like, he'll be on all the posters, Lost coming up. So when he dies halfway through the pilot, people are going to be fucking shocked.
Yes.
It's going to be like Janet Leigh in Psycho. Like, you just do not see it coming. And I thought this was a brilliant idea. And the idea, Lloyd Braun, who turned out to be not have a stupid idea by any, he saw something that nobody did. None of, you know, in the premise of this show, is an early adopter. He and this other guy, Steve McPherson, who at the time was running Touchstone Television and then took over Lloyd's job running the network.
Right.
They were very vocal opponents of, as was Heather, this idea of killing off Jack. And their reasoning was, it's a great twist, and you will surprise people. But if you do it in the pilot, you are going to teach the audience not to form any emotional bonds with the characters.
Oh, wow.
And
oh, wow.
We said, wow, when you put it like that,
yep,
it's a great idea for a movie, but maybe not for a TV show.
It's a great idea for marketing.
And as
maybe
soon
not
as
for a series.
As soon as we took that note and embraced that idea, Michael Keaton was no longer interested in doing
or The Killing of Jack.
A series. Yes.
The Killing of Jack specifically was no longer.
Correct.
And then, so I see. So then Michael said, "Oh, I see. If you're not going to kill me, then I really can't sign on."
And I don't even know how advanced JJ had a line to a direct line to Michael Keaton. So I don't know how advanced those talks became.
Right.
I think there was some interest on his part when it was, oh, I get to be the guy who like gives the big Sam Jackson speech in Deep Blue Sea and then get killed, but less of an interest in being number one on the call sheet.
Right. So you do have 3 weeks to cast this thing, and the cast is huge, although about to get ridiculously larger as the years go on.
Yes.
But initially, even, you write for how many voices do we see in the pilot that are so-called series? I mean,
I think there were 14.
Under contract, you may have had some of them as 7 with an option.
Correct, yeah, 10-13s.
10-13s.
Right. In layman's terms, that's you'll use them in 10 of 13 episodes.
Right. Without a commitment for back.
Right. And if you use them in more than 10, you have to pay them a premium.
Right.
So we had sold the show on, and by the way, this is the great news about Lost. We never would have sold that show if we had gone in and pitched everything that JJ and I had come up with in that room. Heavily serialized, probably genre elements, nonlinear storytelling, huge sprawling cast. You know, can't shoot it in L.A. or Vancouver. You know,
you can't make this.
No sets. No. The only way that it got on the air was because Lloyd wanted it on the air, and so all these unconventional things
and these failed
we were allowed to do.
Prior at launching an idea that Lloyd had been frustrated by.
Right.
All these things leading up to this perfect storm of a moment.
Correct.
And then you two knuckleheads hitting it off lightning fast. And
JJ obviously having just an incredible reputation. The idea that it was JJ was another huge part of it. And
it sounds like when you were first meeting, he got so passionate about the idea, his offerings.
Yes.
That he wasn't just going to supervise a writer to go off and write this fucking thing.
Correct.
He wanted to jump in, and that must have excited the hell out of Lloyd.
And wanted to direct it too.
Yeah.
Which was suddenly this idea of JJ had just turned in a pilot that he had written himself called The Catch.
Right.
He said, let's put that on the back burner. He handed Alias off, which was always a very difficult thing for him because that was his baby. And then just went full bore on Lost.
There's no stopping it for Lloyd.
No, that was it.
I believe you're in the catbird seat at that moment. Let me just,
In the catbird seat.
As a creator who is being brought up to the majors in a heartbeat.
Yes, and terrified, you know.
Great. You don't want to be sloppy confident.
Right.
Being brought up to the majors. JD, the baseball player.
JD Drew.
JD Drew. The phenom, who Tony La Russa talks about in 3 Nights in August. If you're a baseball fan at all, you have to read this book that Buzz Bissinger, Pulitzer Prize writer, wrote Friday Night Lights.
Right.
But he talks about this player, JD Drew, who's a phenom all through school, and he gets into the majors.
I've heard of this
and
book.
he's bored. There's no one can inspire this kid because he's so fucking great. He doesn't have that anxiety of I have to prove something.
Correct.
So that definitely adds into the perfect storm as a writer. Here's this opportunity. Oh my God, 3 weeks. I mean, I can't even wrap my brain around it. That was a part of the story that I had no idea. So 12 weeks later, 3 months or less, you're handing in locked print?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Everything minus the Giacchino score, I think. We had temp scored it at that point. But it had effects, the whole thing.
Right.
And the 2-hour.
Right.
So.
And you're obviously, JJ's going to direct, but it's crystal clear this thing goes to series. You're showrunner, or not clear yet?
Well, the joke is so basically in the same chronology.
Because it's got to be a part of the network, just to put things in perspective.
Yes.
The network is thrilled beyond belief that JJ has said, this is my guy.
Correct.
He and I are doing this.
Yes.
Lloyd Braun calls you personally before JJ can get to you and says, you're my fucking guy.
Right.
But being a network, someone's got to be saying, this kid's never run a show before. What the fuck are you talking about? JJ's not going to run it.
Absolutely. Well,
or is he?
I thought he might. I mean, I thought we might do it
If
in
you're
tandem.
the network, you've got to be concerned about that.
Following the Saturday when Lloyd made the call, I took Tim out to lunch and I said, I can no longer be Bruce Wayne by day and Batman by night. I must now full-time commit myself to this thing. May I leave, sir? And he said, yeah, you'll write another script for Crossing Jordan, but you go with my blessing. So Monday I started full-time on Lost, and JJ said, do you want to have lunch? And I said, sure. And we were walking over to the rotunda on the Disney lot, and he puts out his hand and he goes, hi, JJ Abrams. And the joke was, we don't even know each other. We are suddenly on the front page of Variety together. We are, you know, and the spin on the show at this point was that it was Lloyd Braun's folly, that he was going to spend a shitload of money on something that was just not a series. Nobody, including myself.
Gilligan's Island and a drama.
Yeah, nobody, including myself, believed that there was real serious potential there. But at the very least, we had a pilot that was going to be really cool. in that same walk over to the rotunda, JJ said to me, you're going to run this thing if it gets picked up, right? And I said, sure, JJ, I'll run it. Now, in reality, that was him very clearly expressing to me that that was his intention.
And that he was not going to.
Correct. Right. I just never believed. I was 30 years old. I had never run a show before. If the show got picked up for 13 episodes, it would be a $60 million, you know, essential influx of venture capital. Huge risk. They are not going to allow me.
You had every reason to believe
to do this.
You had no chance.
So the safety net below me was like, yes, JJ, I am willing to run the show.
Right.
Thinking that it would never happen in a million years. It's the second we had after we essentially shot this movie in Hawaii for 5 weeks. JJ shot this beautiful movie. We had 9 days to edit and lock the picture. And on the second day,
did you call Guinness Book at any point during this and say
this happens every year with pilots? I mean, just a little more insane.
2 hour
by law standards, a little more, but you know. The third or fourth day of editing, I walked into the editing room and JJ was sitting there with Tom Cruise, and he's like, hey, Damon, this is Tom. And you have to do that whole thing where you're like, I don't know you, Tom Cruise. Where you're like, oh, hi, Tom, Damon. You know, and he's like, this is amazing.
Yes.
Tom Cruise is like, this is incredible. I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
And I'm just, my brain is going, what is Tom Cruise doing here? Why is he watching The Lost Pilot? Are he and JJ friends? Oh shit, JJ is better friends with Tom Cruise than he is with me. I'm fucked. Like, this all sort of happens in my brain. And lo and behold, you know, before the paint is dry on Lost, JJ is announcing he has been handpicked to direct his first feature, which is going to be Mission Impossible 3.
Right.
So it is made very clear to me that JJ is not going to be running the show with me.
Right.
To answer your question.
But the heat and power that your partner has just increased.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
Hugely.
Right.
And there's the potential of him making a call at that point saying, there's no one else but Damon to do this. If he's not doing it, we have more than a problem.
And apparently he did make that call because
I'm sure
they were letting me proceed. I kept waiting for the moment. And as the series started getting rolling, just to jump ahead, I started realizing that I was woefully unprepared and lacked the essential skills to do the job by myself, to actually churn out, you know, we did 25 hours in the first season, including the pilot, so 23 more episodes of Lost. I was not going to be able to do that. Just the story-breaking process and the writing of the show was beyond overwhelming for me. But in addition to that, I was flying back and forth between Los Angeles and Hawaii. I was managing the expectations of 14 series regulars, all of whom felt that they were signing on for a show where they would probably get a lot more screen time than, wait a minute, I'm an extra in 2 episodes in a row? Well, this is Saeed's episode, dude. Like, so I'm suddenly like, wait a minute, I'm the parent here?
Yeah.
Like, I'm the one who wants to go cry myself to sleep every night. So I never would have taken the job had I known what the job was. I just felt like the job just happened to me.
It's a beautiful moment and crystallizes a very important part of show business as a creative entity, be a writer, actor, or what have you, which is there's a train moving, it's reaching out for you and your talent. It would like to put you in the front car. Are you coming? And you don't pack a bag.
Right.
You get on the fucking train.
Yes.
In this case, it's a bullet monster Uber train beyond Japan's capability.
Yes.
So, is this the moment where you reach out to a former employer? Was Carlin had hired you to be on staff somewhere?
On Nash Bridges, that was my first real gig.
Right.
And Carlton and the other guy who was running Nash Bridges in its final season, this guy John Worth, took me under their wings. And really, as opposed to just showing me how to write and break stories, they let me into the editing room. They started me on what was essentially an apprenticeship that Tim continued, because I really wanted to have my own show at a certain point. So those 4 years, the 1 year on Nash and the 3 years on Crossing Jordan, I was really doing everything I could to soak in what the job was. All that being said, I knew what the job was and how to do the job. I did not know how the job felt.
No.
So
couldn't possibly.
So in the third episode of Lost, not the third hour of it, but the third episode that we wrote was one called White Rabbit. And in that episode, Jack Shephard is basically seeing visions of his dead father. and running after him. My father died a year before the show started.
Oh, Jesus.
And this was this very, and this very emotional story for me. But the real backbone of the story was that all the castaways were asking Jack, what should we do? Where should we go? And he's like, I'm just the guy who, like, when I came upon the plane crash, started fixing people. I have doctor skills, but I do not fucking know what to do now.
You wrote yourself into the show.
Right, without even realizing it. And started having very severe emotional problems, insomnia, all compounded by this idea of the show was going to collapse. I was a fraud and everybody was going to know it, which it took 6 years to happen, but finally happened.
119 episodes in, somebody said they jumped the shark.
Finally. So, and started asking the network for help. I said, I need somebody to come in and do this. JJ was in Maine at the time, and he was going to come back from Maine and start working on Mission Impossible. He was very pro, we're going to get you help, but that help is not going to be me. We need to be pragmatic about this. And the network was sort of like, we liked the scripts. My first breakdown was around the time that I wrote Confidence Man, which was the 6th episode or the 8th hour of the show, which is a Sawyer flashback.
Yeah.
That's kind of when I hit the wall. And at the Carlton, I had been calling him all along the way, just saying, just kind of as a mentor figure, what the hell should I do? How should I called him up and I said, I need a partner. And he was kind of in retirement at that point. He was working on a couple movies, but he was no longer interested in show running, per se. And I said, will you come and do this with me? And he said, send me all the scripts that you've written and any cuts that you have now, and I'll call you back. I sent them all. He read them all that night. He called back the next day and said, I'll do it if you'll have me. And then I called JJ and I said, I found my guy. JJ was like, yay. The network was like, yay. And then Carlton started. We had written, I think, episodes 7 and 8 simultaneously. It was Raised by Another and Solitary, Claire and Saeed flashback stories. The first one that Carlton worked on was All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues, which was the 9th episode of the first season. And then when he came in, my entire world changed much more positively. I think I only tried to quit one more time after that.
Just the one?
Yeah, just one.
Instead of every week?
I threatened to quit often, but only actually quit one more time.
Right.
Just between episodes 12 and 13.
Holy crap.
And then, you know, as you know, we were partners until the very end. So.
Yeah. Thick as thieves.
Indeed.
And in that working relationship, was there a sense of immediately cut and clear responsibilities? How do you divvy up those? Because you had this previous relationship which was not partners.
Correct.
A mentor.
Well, the first relationship was boss and employee.
You're right.
Then the new relationship was mentor.
Right.
No official capacity. He's Obi-Wan, you know. And then the new one was, we are partners.
And how wonderful of him to phrase it, if in fact that's an exact quote, if you'll have me. I mean, that's very powerful stuff.
That's my memory of it. Yeah. I mean, you know.
That's all that matters. And but that's really powerful in terms of entree. Mm-hmm. And then it's just a matter of discussing, for example, minding these 14 egos.
Sure.
And if I may speak for all actors, oh dear God. You know, you brushed over it.
Yeah.
But 14 actors saying, I'm an extra in 2 episodes is beyond funny. It's a fucking nightmare if you're running a show. I mean, I'm sure a lot was explained ahead of time. A lot was explained during the pilot.
Right.
There's a big cast here. You know, we're going to be mixing up week to week, but no, actors can compartmentalize what you're saying, and what he really means is the other actors are going to have to suffer that, not me.
And it's Hawaii, so it's not, you can continue along with your daily lives, with your families, you can pursue other jobs. In Los Angeles, you are basically, if you're not in this episode, you're sitting around for 2 weeks in Hawaii, which seems like, how could you dare complain? But the reality is
Alcatraz and Technicolor.
Yeah, I mean,
there's only so much to do.
It's beautiful, but unless you are completely and totally embracing the Hawaii lifestyle right out of the gate, and you don't have any friends or family elsewhere,
you're on an island.
You're on an island that is a 6-hour flight from the mainland, and we were not letting anybody leave because the scripts were coming in with maybe 4 or 5 days of prep before an episode, but an actor would basically read a script and say, like, I'm not even in this one, can I go to the mainland? No. because we might change our minds.
The way you wrote yourself into Jack, as it turned out, not knowing you were doing it, but the experience of the father, you were acting as the island, telling the actors, you're staying. You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, well, maybe. I don't know.
We're not allowing you off the island.
That's
so, but I'm saying, from an actor's perspective,
yes,
and you're doing this show about not being able to leave an island,
right,
and being told you're not allowed to leave the island.
Yes.
I don't think you're the only one potentially breaking down a little bit.
Sure.
So now you've got you and Carlton with the responsibility of the scripts and the sort of instant interest, least we forget what's happening out there in your viewership.
Well, there was a huge that was the change. That was when everything changed on September 22nd. The period of ambivalence on the actor's part, where it's essentially, what is this thing? Because the idea of getting a script and not, you know, every single script taking you down a different road, and the idea, it was non-traditional storytelling, and that each one of them got to be the lead of their own episode, but they might be 10 episodes away from the next time that they got to do that. Wrapping their brains around that. When the show premiered, all of that went away. Like, it was the happiest place on earth.
Right.
There was no kvetching. It was the opposite trajectory as a lot of the time everybody is playing nice and then the show becomes a hit and they all become monsters. This was not our experience. Right. Once the show premiered and it was a hit, everybody completely and totally gelled and couldn't have been sweeter, nicer, or more supportive. And it continued on that way for quite some time.
So thank God for that.
Yeah, no, it was awesome.
Yeah.
And that was around, we had just written the 7th script when the show premiered.
So let's be clear, you're running a show. You're not running, you guys aren't flying back and forth on a weekly basis, are you?
For that first year?
The first season?
Yeah, I was. I mean, and then Carlton came on and then he was. Yeah, back and forth. And we had Jack Bender in Hawaii, who is sort of the unsung hero of Lost. He directed sort of every 3rd or 4th episode and produced all the episodes in Hawaii that he wasn't directing. So he was our man in Havana. But that first year, there was just we were all finding the show together.
Right.
So after the first year, Hawaii was completely and totally Jack's domain, and we couldn't trust him more to basically figure out all the logistical elements. Gene Higgins, who is our line producer, figuring out the incredible ambition of getting each of these crazy scripts into a 10-day schedule with no sets. You know, we built this very shitty cave set for the first season that we did not like the way it looked and very quickly tried to get them out of. So the show, we were shooting exteriors, you know, 10
and how
days
about
a
they
week.
running out of money? I can't remember what season it was, but in the research reading, you're running out of money and having to put them in cages for 4 episodes.
It wasn't just money, we were also running out of story. And I think that we as storytellers felt like we were trapped in a cage, because by that time, by season 3, we had worked out almost the entire end game of the show. We knew that 6 of them were going to get off the island, that during that period of them being off the island, they were going to regret it, and then they'd have to get back to the island, and once they get back to the island, the entire show was going to end. So that was essentially 3 seasons of story. It ended up being season 4, 5, and 6. Season 4 is they get off. Season 5 is they come back. Season 6 is the resolution. We could not they couldn't leave the island. Nobody could get off until the network agreed to an end date. So we locked the characters up in cages in the beginning of the 3rd season because they literally could not move forwards anymore. And we were doing, you know, some characters' 5th or 6th flashback story. Right. So you're learning about like why Jack got his tattoos, or the 3rd or 4th guy that Kate left so that she could run away as a fugitive again. It was just getting so redundant and terrible.
Holy shit. I swear we're going to get to Cowboys and Aliens.
Oh. Who cares?
What?
No, I mean, I love Cowboys and Aliens. I'm just saying, like, if you're watching this, you probably want to hear me cry about Lost.
No.
Whine about it. No.
No.
I'd love to talk about Cowboys and Aliens.
I'm unbelievably thrilled for Favreau. We were talking about the other day how on the Friday that Iron Man opened, Jamie and I went to a matinee. And you talk about being brought up to the majors. And also the magic of rediscovering RDJ. Again, a perfect storm of elements. And the battle and struggle that Favreau went through to convince everyone that Downey Jr. was ready.
Right.
and the humanity built into that character.
Sure.
Continue to digress, but hearkening to, you take nothing more out of Arthur, well, tell from the new one, but in the sense of who's going to care about this drunk rich guy.
Right.
Until you filter in the humanity, it isn't possible. And we were talking about that Friday matinee, and I called Favreu at home and said, well, he had already figured this out for himself, but I had to call him to say, you've just been brought up to the majors and your life is changing. Because to me, he was Johnny Favreu and not,
Sure.
you know.
Swinger soundtrack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I picked too many soundtracks, apparently. I
Well,
had
you
to
have.
narrow it in.
You
There
had
you go.
great ones, though.
They are good.
But he was, you know, suddenly a master of this domain.
Sure.
And the excitement for that. So cutting to this, where does he go? And his announcement not to do Iron Man 3 and his decision to move forward and beyond. And how the fuck do you follow that?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started to hear about Cowboys and Aliens, it was, this is beyond a brilliant bridge to wherever else he's headed.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I know a little bit from the research how that, and I guess assumptions made in, filtered in, but filled in. But I would rather hear from you in terms of how you're brought into that world.
Absolutely.
I mean, after Iron Man 2, literally the world's his oyster.
Sure, and you know, and I think one of the brilliant things about Jon as a director is that he did that thing that we all aspire to do as storytellers, which is you do genre non-genre. So Iron Man is not. There's something just completely and totally accessible about, hey, the guy built the suit. He's a genius. Like, there's nothing supernatural about this whatsoever. It's not even a traditional superhero movie in all those ways. And I remember when I saw Iron Man, just to digress real quick, just that scene where Pepper is working on Tony's heart. That the whole movie is in that scene, and just you don't see that scene
In these movies.
In these movies, certainly not these movies by any stretch of the imagination. So Cowboys and Aliens for me, the entire journey started when I was an assistant in town, after I first came out here, and I remember reading in Variety that a comic book called Cowboys and Aliens had just been optioned by, I think, DreamWorks and Universal, and this guy, Steve Odekirk, was going to write it, who was very, very hot at the time. And on the front page of Variety, there was a cowboy on a horse, sort of aiming his pistol as he's riding over his shoulder, and there's a huge spacecraft, like Star Destroyer-sized spacecraft, hovering over him. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm there. You know, you just got my $7 at the time.
Sure.
Yeah. Now it's much more. Let's fetch about movie prices. Mm-hmm. In any case, and then over time, just it would go away and come back and go away and come back. Now this is like 98 or 99, so it's a dozen years ago that I first heard about this project.
Right.
4 years ago, I was in Mexico, very good friends, family friends with Alex Kurtzman of Kurtzman and Orci, who wrote the Star Trek movie, and were alias writers before that, so they're in the JJ verse. Right. I had actually met Alex and Bob through my wife. They all worked on a movie together. She was a producer as well. So we're in Mexico with Alex and his wife, and Alex and I are going for a jog, and he says, hey, have you ever heard of this thing, Cowboys and Aliens? And I say, greatest title ever that will never get made. And he said, we've actually kind of inherited it now. We have a production deal at DreamWorks. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Imagine is on it. Steven Spielberg and Stacey Snider are involved. Multiple studios. Since DreamWorks just left Paramount, I think Paramount's involved too. But there's got to be something to be made out of this. And we've been working with a couple of writers, Ferguson Otsby, who came up with a really cool take on this thing. And we're just about to push it over the finish line. You know, what do you think? And he and I just kind of started riffing some ideas back and forth, and he kind of told me the movie that they had come up with was going to be sort of more modeled on this let's make it a Western that has aliens in it, as opposed to a sci-fi movie that has cowboys in it.
Right.
Those are two very, very different things. And I said, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And Favreau really drove that home, and Stephen particularly, who I'm just going to call Stephen now,
Sure.
because we're friends.
I think it's important that you do call him Steve.
Steve.
That's uncomfortable.
Yeah. He wanted it to be a Western as well. So this idea of, essentially, I'm one of what will be 7 credited writers on the movie, so I feel like I don't even get to talk about Cowboys and Aliens because that feeling of authorship that I've had on other projects, I feel much more comfortable giving to the people who did all the heavy lifting. But I did get to have a very fun period of around 6 months to a year working on that movie, and that draft got Jon on, which I feel very proud of.
Should be.
And then started working with Jon once he came on, but then the 5th season of Lost was starting. So I went back into that 80-hour-a-week rabbit hole, and the work had to sort of continue beyond me.
Right.
But during that time period, working with Jon, got to know him, respect him, and then Jon and Stephen together. Stephen was like, hey, do you guys want to go see The Searchers? I've got like the Warner Brothers Theater. So the 5 of us are sitting in the Warner Brothers Theater, just the 5 of us, with Stephen's pristine, print of The Searchers, and Spielberg is giving us a running DVD commentary of The Searchers.
Jesus Christ.
So I'm just like, this is another one of those moments where I never ever go like, yeah, this is my life, yeah. I'm just like, I'm just waiting to be told I'm in the Matrix.
Yeah. You're in the wrong room, actually.
Yeah.
Someone else is supposed to be in here.
So those kind of crazy experiences, and obviously, once the movie started getting cast, the idea that Harrison Ford is going to be saying some things that I may have written is pretty much the most amazing thing ever. Daniel Craig is just super cool. Sam Rockwell. The cast is just, that's another thing that I think Jon does just beautifully, is just casting his movies.
Right. Well, the best directors do.
Yeah, so.
But as you make the transition from this goal, as you go west, young man, I think I want to work in television, and then you find yourself working in television on a few other shows, and then you're brought into this absurd moment in time for you, for JJ, for Lloyd, for a lot of people, for the network, for an audience that's waiting to hang on a cliffhanger. You rise to that point in your television career, and there's got to be suggestions from agents that you jump to film as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. The transition is another precarious road in terms of how much of like a porcelain egg do you treat your own career? How do you were able to have such success in TV because you were at a point of being young and fearless to a certain degree? Have you become fat and sassy? These are more reasons to want to get back into a sleeping bag and not answer the phone.
Right.
Because at some point in this particular business, everything you do is about the next thing you do.
Yes.
If you want a career.
Sure.
So, with all of that at hand, I want to hear just a little bit, because I don't want to keep you here your entire life, about the work with Ridley Scott that I think you only recently completed.
Yeah.
This is the prequel to Alien.
Well,
or is it?
Or is it? I think is should be the tagline, as opposed to if in space nobody can hear you scream. It should just say Prometheus. Or is it? This is as to its origins.
I mean, initially on paper it looks like script doctoring. It looks like save the situation, please.
It started as an Alien prequel. That is what everybody wanted it to be. Obviously, Ridley Scott has not made a science fiction movie in 25 years since Blade Runner, so the idea that he's returning to this genre is huge. And but there's a very real issue, which is, what is the state of the Alien franchise at this point in our lives? You know, now it's Alien versus Predator and all these things. It's been completely and totally diluted. And if you're returning to, I've always felt, really good prequels should be original movies. And the sequel to those prequels should not be the movie that already exists. Because, all due respect to anybody who makes a prequel, why would you ruin the greatest twist in the history of movie cinema, Luke, I am your father, by showing me 3 movies that basically spoil that surprise? You can do movies that take place before Star Wars, but I don't need to see the story of the Skywalker clan. Show me something else where that I can't guess the possible outcome of. There's no suspense and inevitability. So a true prequel should essentially precede the events of the original film, but be about something entirely different, feature different characters, have an entirely different theme, although it takes place in that same world.
Right.
That was my fundamental feeling about what this movie wanted to be, and truth be told, it wasn't script doctoring in the strictest sense, because the draft that existed before I came on was written by this guy named Jon Spaihts, and it was very good. And there are a lot of things in the movie Prometheus that were hatched by Jon Spaihts and written by Jon Spaihts, and I feel like somewhere in the sort of media reconstruction of this story, the tale is, I come in, I pitch an entirely new movie, and it's so original that everything else gets thrown out, and that's what we're doing. I don't, in my brain, that's not exactly what happened. But I also do feel like that this movie is the movie that I want to see. I would want to see as a fanboy take place in that Alien universe that precedes the events of the original Alien, but is not necessarily burdened by all the tropes of that franchise with face huggers and chest bursters and all that stuff that I love. But it's sort of like, we've seen it before. Can we do something different this time?
Right.
And that's the movie that Ridley wanted to make. And when you're working with, now that's an auteur right there. You know, you basically just shut your mouth and listen and try to transcribe and or channel the vision of that person and get out of the way.
Oh, God, yes. And what's exciting to me as a fan of your work is, there's one thing to grab the hand on the train that says, sure, I'm ready to jump on a big, giant, scary train again. But how much of a thought process goes into this decision that I'm going to take this on, instead of just jumping on the train this time, given what I was saying about this transition from television to film? You're not just jumping on any train. You mentioned it yourself. First time he's returning to this milieu in 25 years.
Right.
A master at that milieu who's been away, who purposely stayed away, one has to assume.
Yes.
For 25 years.
Right.
He's returning.
Yes.
Can't be any anticipation of what that's going to be.
And truth be told, the story is very similar to the Lost story, which is, I'd given a mandate to my representatives and my wife and myself that over for the time that Lost was on, that's all that I was going to be doing, with one exception, which was I produced Star Trek. I was able to produce Star Trek largely because the strike happened when it did, but also because I had such a working familiarity with JJ already, and Alex and Bob, who wrote, in my opinion, an incredible screenplay.
Absolutely.
We were all so facile together, and we did Star Trek the same way that we did TV. In collaboration, and that's where I work best. So I was able to float in and out of the creative process while Alex and Bob were doing the heavy lifting on the script, so it was not time intensive. And then the writer's strike happened the day before we started production on the movie, so I was actually able to be on that set as a producer.
Wait a minute. Yes, you are the center of the universe. I just realized that you're controlling all of this.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, I caused the writer's strike.
That timing is insane.
Incredible. So, with the exception of Star Trek and 6 issues of a comic book that it took me 3 years to write, because that's how pathetic I am in terms of my.
No, you suck
if
at
I'm
that.
thinking about Lost, I'm thinking about Lost.
Right.
As soon as Lost was over, Lost ended May 23rd of last year, of 2010, and then I went with my family to Italy for a month, completely dropped off the face of the planet, and when I arrived back at the very beginning of July, I said to my feature agent, Todd Feldman, who was incredible and had been very patient, saying, you know,
historically
saying
patient.
I was not available. I said, okay, I'm back and I'm willing to start thinking about movie stuff. And he said, great, got it. 3 days later, I was driving down Ventura Boulevard in my car. My phone rang. It was Todd. He said, are you available to talk to Ridley Scott in 5 minutes?
You said, fuck you, of course.
I said, let me pull my car over so I don't go through a dead spot. But is it really going to be 5 minutes, or is it Hollywood 5 minutes?
And you were done asking, is it really JJ Abrams?
Yeah, right. No, exactly. Could have been. He does a good Todd Feldman. So I said, yes. Do you know what it's about? And he goes, I think I have an idea what it's about, but I'm not sure. And I'm thinking, well, I follow this shit pretty closely. I'm a fanboy. I spend a lot of time on the internet. This has got to be the Alien prequel. Like, that's what Ridley Scott is working on right now, isn't it?
But you were in Italy for a month.
Yeah, I was in Italy.
You checked out. Something might have come up.
So 5 minutes later, sure enough, Ridley Scott calls me, and he just starts talking to me like we know each other. Like, because those guys do.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, he's not going to be like, hello, Damon, Ridley Scott, big fan, listen, you know?
Listen, old boy.
Yeah, he's just like,
Yeah.
So I've got a script, I'm going to send it to you, tell me what you think. And so I go home, and my wife's like, how's your day? And I said, I think a script is coming over, Ridley Scott is sending me a script. She's like, what? 45 minutes later, ding dong. There's a young PA there, hands me a script. He says, I'll be waiting in my car when you're done. Come and get me, hand it back to me. So it's one of those.
Honey, I need 2 hours.
Yeah, it's one of those, you're not going to get to keep this. I read it. This is the script that
Do
Jon
you tip
Spaihts.
the guy, by the way, when you give the script back?
Absolutely. You put it in the pages, though, because you don't want to make him uncomfortable. And my wife is like, should we feed him? Should we bring food out there? What do we do with that guy?
Of course, you got to offer him something to drink.
Yeah, exactly. Sure, absolutely. So
I do love that you made him sit in the car.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was like, you can drive around. It's going to be a couple, but someone had clearly told him, you go there, you give this motherfucker this script, and you sit in your car. Like, in case he try. That way he can say he did not sneak out and photocopy the script. Because let's be honest, I would have.
There's a thing called the internet. There's people waiting.
There's a kink goes right down the street.
Yeah.
Who's to say I don't have a copier in my house? So I read it, and like I said, it was good. Like, this was not a disaster.
Right.
This was not a triage situation. There were really good ideas in that script. And so I sent off an email. Ridley works with these guys, the two Michaels, Michael Ellenberg and Michael Costigan, and basically sent him an email saying, look, I read it. Here's what I think. Here's what I would do if you were interested. And the next morning...
You're telling me, here's what I would do, is what you laid out for him. How long between finished reading it and writing this email where you're slightly pitching your take on things as to whether he's going to ask you to write the script?
Half an hour. Like,
What's the matter with you?
Why?
You don't want to give yourself a night to chew on this a little bit?
No, he said, tell me what you think.
All right.
I'm kind of like, again,
so in other words, what I'm asking...
Again, the stopping and the consideration for me leads to, forget it. Like, don't bother. They're not going to like what you have to say.
Don't overthink it.
The only way that I can actually appear to be brave is to just walk off the end of the diving board, because the second that I stop walking, that's it. Like, there will be no dive. That's just every great thing that's ever happened to me in my life has happened exactly this way.
Right.
The do you want to meet JJ? You never know when your phone's going to ring, and like the careful deliberation thing does not work for me because I always find a way to talk my way out of it.
That's pretty fantastic and important to know, so thanks for sharing that, seriously.
It's true. I don't think I've ever consciously said it out loud before. But.
Well, that's even better. But there is the notion of, this is a great, amazing opportunity, and it deserves a little bit of my time before I tell Sir Ridley Scott what I would like to do with his film.
Right.
And I love that you said, it's been a half hour, he said to call. He said he wanted to know what I thought.
Right.
I got to tell him now. So you share your ideas, and he says...
Well,
in an email.
He doesn't have an email address. It's like, send your email to these guys. And so I did feel that there was a certain degree of safety that I wasn't saying, yo, Ridley, like, you know, this is what it's going to be, that they would basically,
Mike and Mike?
If my ideas were completely and totally shitty, the two Michaels would insulate me from embarrassment and say, thank you for weighing in. And by the way that it works in town, and I'm no dummy, there's sweepstakes pitching.
Yes.
Who knows how many other people they're out to.
Right.
So that's the other thing that's making me
pick up the pace.
Respond immediately. And also, I was excited. I was creatively engaged by this thing. I'm like, let's get to work. Like, let's dive in. I want to meet Ridley Scott. Because this is just, I'm not going to get the meeting unless the email has some presentation in which they're excited by. So the next morning, I get the call, we liked your take, can you come in to Scott Free? So this is it. I'm going in. I walk into a room. There's Ridley Scott. There's this guy Steve Asbell, who is an executive at Fox. Great guy, very creative. And now I verbally present. Here's everything that I love in the script as it exists now, and here's some of my thinking on it. What's the lay of the land? What are the issues that you guys are having? And we have a great 90-minute meeting in which I do a lot of listening. Again, like I said, I don't want to go in and say, like, I wowed him. What really happened was I gave a very short presentation, and then Ridley talked about the movie that he wanted to make. Right. And then they decided to hire me. And I had to go down to Fox and talk to Tom Rothman about what I wanted to do as well. And then Sir Ridley Scott and I and Michael Ellenberg sat in a conference room for 4 hours a day, 3 times a week, and sort of went over it again and again and again, and until I understood exactly what he wanted to do. And then I went off and I wrote it. And it took me 2 weeks to write it, not a lot of time. The time-consuming part was the collaboration, because he thinks, I mean, I know that it sounds like I'm brown-nosing, but Ridley Scott is a true genius, and he thinks in visual terms that are far beyond the comprehension of mortals like us, but also understands story and mood and tone and all these things. And
clearly.
And the other thing was, I have a lot of tricks that I learned as a writer that are cheap tricks, you know, sort of deflecting with humor. Or one of the great things about having like 15 different characters is when you get bored with one or run into a wall with one, you just neglect them. And you play with your Buzz Lightyear doll while Woody, you know, gathers dust. So writing a Ridley Scott movie for me felt like I had a chance at complete and utter failure because it was so outside my wheelhouse. Although it felt like a very natural fit. He's very serious. There are moments of humor, but like very serious, very visual, not dialogue heavy, you know, more moody. So all these things, I'm like, I can really learn a lot from. If you're going to learn from Ridley Scott.
Is there a return to the haunted house nature of the first one in terms of tone? Is there any feeling of that?
All I can say is,
well, obviously,
it's exactly the movie that I would want to see as a fanboy, that for Ridley Scott to come back to that alien world. Like, and so what you just said would be under that heading, you know.
Right.
Yes, unsettling, you know. And unsettling is different than horror.
Right.
You know, jumping out horror. I think some of the scares that worked in the original Alien.
I think you said it best when you were discussing The Shining in terms of what unsettling truly is.
Right. So to me, yes, this was that and is that.
So excited for you, for that, for it.
Thanks. Me too.
Shooting shot?
It's I think they got about 3 weeks to go.
How's my part?
Yeah. I can't believe it.
Right.
I mean, unbelievable.
Oh, we shouldn't talk about it now.
We shouldn't.
No. Actually,
but,
we shouldn't.
You know, Fassbender told me a story about you.
Well, he's a liar. Speaking of things you can't talk about, how much can you not say about 1952?
I can say absolutely nothing about 1952.
Fantastic.
This is, I will say this about 1952.
It was a hell of a year.
Great year. Fantastic. Unbelievable.
Right.
It is very early days on 1952. 1952 is another one of those things where Sean Bailey, who is now the head of Disney, he and I were having lunch. We were having a very casual conversation just about, he had produced Tron. Eddie and Adam, who were writers on Lost, wrote Tron. And so he was talking about what he wanted to do at Disney and the sort of whole idea. And I think he's really, really smart, and very rarely do guys who run studios have they had an experience as being a producer.
Right.
Do they know how movies are made? And he's young and hip and has the same sort of language that we do, and his sort of whole thing is, you know, I just want to make cool movies. And I think that sounds so obvious, but it's also like, you know, when you think about some of the movies that Disney has been releasing over the, you know, the past decade, like Pirates of the Caribbean shouldn't have been cool, but it's cool. Like, it's totally cool, I think. I thought it was when I went and saw it. Maybe it's Johnny, maybe it's the sensibility of those movies, but
oh no, the essence of being cool is all throughout that whole thing.
And it's based on a theme park ride, so it has no business being cool, and yet it's cool.
Which Haunted Mansion, the movie, proved.
Right. And now, but you look at now what under Sean's stewardship, Haunted Mansion is now going to be Guillermo del Toro, and Sam Raimi's going to do Wizard of Oz, and I'm fucking in line for those movies.
Yeah, no kidding.
You know, so we have a very casual conversation. That conversation leads to a, hey, you know, I'm writing Star Trek 2, producing Star Trek 2, but once that's done, this is sort of an interesting arena to play in. Maybe we can start talking about this. And the next thing I know, it's on Nikki Fink. So, like, we're a year away from announcing what it is. So now I have to play the mystery box thing, which I'm not that good at.
Right.
Like, and I like to tell people more about what I'm doing, because after 6 years of Lost is like, you know, this is what it is.
The gates have
like,
been opened.
Yeah, I'm telling you what it is.
Yeah.
The only reason that there's any secrecy swirling around 1952 is it's just, why say what it is until I've started working on it?
Yeah, well, that is organic and makes.
That being said, it's gonna fucking blow your mind. It's the greatest movie
It
ever
just
made.
did.
It's gonna be the greatest movie ever made.
It just literally blew out the back of my head.
It's going to be conservatively the first movie to make $1 trillion.
Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Somebody, you know, we just skipped $1 billion.
Yeah.
So somebody write that down.
Yeah.
1 trillion.
My son is obsessed with octillion. He has skipped trillion,
Oh, no.
quadrillion.
Oh, no.
I didn't even know what was after quadrillion. Do you?
So
Quintillion.
No.
Quintillion, yes,
Yep.
and then sextillion, septillion.
So it's the. Oh God! It's
Nonillion,
octillion.
It's the moment.
decadillion.
It's novillion.
Is it novillion?
Yeah, because you go into October, November, December.
Right.
It's
Oh.
it's octillion, novillion.
Novillion.
So it's the
decillion.
Austin Powers moment of I want $1 million.
Right.
I mean the Dr. Evil actually.
Sure.
$1 million.
You know, it's that I don't know if you know this, but Dr. Evil is portrayed by Mike Myers. It's true. As is Seth Green, portrayed by Mike Myers.
Well, everyone knew that.
Yeah, in real life.
I mean, why was-
Mike Myers is making Robot Chicken. I didn't know if you knew that. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the first. I just wanted to get a laugh from your better half, and finally,
From the head writer.
where are we?
That is the one.
2 hours in. Bingo.
May I say a couple of things about where we are? We're at part 1 of a 3-parter.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Eddie Izzard?
I am. Yes.
Fan?
I am a fan.
Don't have to be.
I am a fan. I'm not. I cannot quote his. I have seen his HBO specials. Does that?
He's
does
an
that qualify
astounding
me as-
performer.
Yeah.
See him live if you can. He'll be at the Hollywood Bowl this summer.
Wow.
I highly recommend it.
Okay.
He's extraordinary.
I will be there.
Until today, he held the record at this table of 2 hours and 31 minutes. Until today.
Where are we now?
Yeah! High five! Yeah, we did it!
Sammy,
We did it! Yeah!
We're
exhausted and we did this stupid fucking thing! Yeah!
Wait a minute. How long have we been talking?
2 hours, 40 minutes.
Wow.
Congratulations.
It's
So
not
proud of us.
something we should be congratulating ourselves
No,
for.
don't kid yourself. We will be celebrated.
Wow.
And again, like I said, it's part 1 of a 3-parter. So we'll see you next year.
I will be back.
Yeah. Well, we will.
All you have to do is ask.
Thank you. Honestly.
7 times.
The art of the.
It's sort of like becoming a Jew.
Yeah, a little bit.
I say no the first 6 times.
That's right.
7th time,
Why not?
will there be vodka?
Yeah. And I didn't make you cry. That was something that was being debated on
Oh, yes.
Twitter as to whether or not that would happen. I cried halfway through.
He may cry because he has to urinate so badly soon.
No, actually,
have to.
he didn't touch the water.
I went an hour ago.
Yeah.
Rupret.
I'm making.
Yes.
Honest to goodness. Oh my. And so many.
Unanswered questions.
Well, you know, I hope you're fine with my succeeding in spending too much time on the topic of unanswered questions, because I imagine you're bored to death with it.
No.
No, I mean in terms of loss. But but the truth of the matter is, after doing all the research, it became crystal clear to me that all the answers that were, all the questions that needed to be answered were done so by the show's creators, and that was wildly satisfactory to me as a true fan of the show, and never really understood the what the fuck happened percentage,
Sure,
whatever that percentage was.
And by the way, just in my own reckoning, they are also fans of the show, and I know
Hugely.
that I felt differently in the past, but am now very clearly. You can hate the show as a whole, or you can even feel that you wasted the last 6 years of your life. I beg to differ with that opinion, but you are still a fan.
Well, that was the point I was making about George R.R. Martin,
right?
Which was he loved the show.
Fan.
Otherwise, he couldn't possibly have had a problem with the ending.
Right.
Incredibly great news. Again.
It is.
Yeah. All right, so all those unanswered questions about other topics. We can't wait to see the Cowboys and Aliens, the Star Trek II. We had John Cho here. He was very excited about beginning that.
He's a nice young man.
Yeah, he's fantastic, and we had a lovely chat there. Visit the archives to watch on iTunes that interview as well as others.
And while you're there, check out Ollie Kluberstorff versus the Nazis.
Oh, yes, yes. A short film that I wrote as a writing sample a very long time ago was a one-act play, Ollie Kluberstorff versus the Nazis. A young gentleman took it upon himself a couple years back to actually make this thing, and it stars a young Sam Levine.
This guy right here.
And
this guy right here.
And someone else.
Maybe known as Thor?
Yeah, Thor.
Yeah.
Christopher Hemsworth is also
Thor
in
in
it.
Dear God.
And isn't like George Segal in it
George
as well?
Segal, Lainey Kazan, Jack Axelrod, who's got a little part in Super 8.
Sure.
And Zach Mills
And
from
Rachel,
Super 8.
and Rachel Nichols.
Stellar cast. And Norman Reedus. Stellar cast.
And go to iTunes and find this under the title.
It's not on iTunes. You got to go on YouTube. I want to say
YouTube.
Just Google it. You'll find it.
If you like Jews and time travel.
Who doesn't? Honey.
That's all I want in life is Jews and time travel. I want to travel back in time to the 70s so I could date Harold Ramis.
Oh my God.
But only the 70s Harold Ramis.
Right, of course.
And 80s.
And early 80s.
Stripes Ramis.
Yes.
It ends with Stripes Ramis.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's everything prior to
There is
that.
room in that RV for you.
My dear.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sit there uncomfortably while I wrap things up. I do want to say that you do technically still owe some sort of Larry King game into that camera. I'm going to give you the rules again, and they're very simple.
Yeah.
I want a bad Larry King, so all the pressure's
That
off.
won't be a problem.
Right? Mm-hmm. JJ Abrams isn't sitting here. If he were sitting here, I would expect a great Larry King.
You should.
Yeah, but in your case, and in all cases, my own example at the top of the show, clearly I want a bad Larry King.
Right.
And then, as I hope you saw, it's that little too much information moment. And by the way, you can go back to prehistoric times when we all know Larry lived.
Yes.
It could be a memory from then.
Right.
It could be a problem with the Danish he had last night. It really doesn't matter.
Uh-huh.
It's that non
The
sequitur.
language Danish or the food?
Either.
Yeah?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I look forward to either. It's really a moment about Larry that nobody contemplated prior. And then go to the phones. And the name of the city you choose to go to could be a funny sounding city.
Right. I just do it now?
It's like the rest of your career, sir.
Into that
I
camera?
suggest you just
I've got to achieve the
walk off the edge.
the bony
Yeah, there it is.
posture.
Bring it in. Bring it. Nice.
True Blood is back tonight. Sexy vampires cavorting, sucking, loving each other. This was not my experience as a member of the undead community. I was bitten by a Prussian nobleman in 1634 at the tender age of 87. Thus, an explanation for why there are no pictures of me as a young man. I have hidden this fact by my decrepit appearance and constant shilling of garlic, which, if I were to actually consume it, would reduce me to a smoldering pile of charcoal like the parrots at the end of Time Bandits. Transylvania, go!
I like it!
Wow.
Oh, my! When somebody walks off the edge,
He's also a film buff.
there's your celebration of the new record holder, ladies and Jews. No more calls, pencils down. We've got a winner.
Didn't know I had that in me.
Congratulations.
She said.
Right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
You've got that for the rest of your life to celebrate.
Who's going to step to my record
Forget
on the
it.
Kevin Pollock
No.
chat show?
No one.
Utter complete waste of
And
time.
if they do, I'll come in and beat it again.
Crush them like a walnut. Oh, dear God, thank you so much. And,
It was a real pleasure.
Well, thank you. All right, I'm going to wrap things up here. You sit there comfortably again in the comfort of being off camera. I do want to thank all of you for joining us for this record-breaking moment in time. I can't believe that Sam and I are still breathing.
This is really unfathomable.
Yeah, it's unfair also.
I hear we get steaks now.
The truth is, there's only one way to celebrate, and that is with steaks. What?
Money's too tight for
Kenny has done so very well within the studio. He, too, has been making for the last 42 minutes. But I wonder what the rest of the crew's been up to while we've been sitting in here, having the time of our lives.
They all have beards.
It's been several hours.
Even Emily. They all have beards.
Well, let's see. If only there was some sort of video evidence that needed some sort of narration from me. Mike, clearly, editing the show. He's running the TriCash.
Mike's
about his
dreaming of
Red
Sox. Okay. Negrin's dreaming
about
beach,
a lovely, beautiful beach. Emily dreaming about wine and cheese.
Yeah.
J-Mac dreaming about J-Mac. That seems unfun.
I didn't explode it. Can't even dream about.
Oh, no! And then the real J-Mac explodes.
That's so sad.
Life's becoming.
Oh, did anyone else catch that very brief flash at the last explosion? We were not paying attention, sir.
It was you at the base?
No, it was the episode title, and underneath were the numbers for.
Were the numbers just now?
They were.
Seriously?
Yeah, you got to have a quick eye, my friend.
Oh my goodness, I can't
It was a
believe I
little
missed that. Well,
homage to our
clearly
guest today.
everyone watching caught it, but those of you listening to the show, those numbers again, they put up the lost numbers, which we never even discussed. Just 8:15.
He's not going to tell you.
No, of course not. You know what? You'll have to tune in for part 2. We'll let you know when that is. I want to thank the Emily Goodwin, the Kenny Chen, the Jamie Foxx, the Sam Levine, the Mike Rotman, our director, the Jason McIntyre, the Josh Negrin, and of course Kelly LeBlanc. And my guest, Carlton Hughes.
No, it's the other one.
You should have him on.
I would love to.
You should.
I would love to.
You should.
JJ, I will not accept.
Now, after
so
all
don't
this
even try
time-
to help
Nope.
that.
Just say his last name the right way once.
Damon Lindelof.
That's pretty close.
That's good.
That is very
Passable?
close.
I'll take that.
Passable.
All right.
Actually.
We got a winner.
And with that, my friends, we say, as always, thank you for joining us. Look to the calendar for upcoming guests. Now get out of my face.